Chapter 347. Li Mu looked at the fulu on the table thoughtfully. The Tao of talismans in this era originated from the ancient times, and it was passed down from the talisman sect's Tao page. Most of the later generations only inherited and used it, and only the geniuses in the talisman Tao of talismans of the talisman sect possessed the ability to innovate and create their own talismans. If this fulu was really created by Zhou Zhong, then his talent in the fulu was not inferior to that of talisman Daozi. He was even better than the peak chiefs of the fulu school. Such a person would not be unknown in the cultivation world. However, Zhou Zhong's name was known by everyone only because he was a pawn of the old party, a lackey of the Shao royal family, and not because of his talent in the way of talismans. At a certain moment, there was a sound of gentle footsteps outside the assistant minister's office. Zhou Zhong walked into the assistant minister's office and looked at Li Mu. He asked, "When did you come back to Luoyang?" Li Mu said, "Not long ago." Zhou Zhong walked to the table and sat down. He asked, "You never come here without a reason. What's the matter this time?" Li Mu asked, "Assistant Minister Zhou, do you know about the assassination of Ani County Magistrate and Tianhe County Deputy?" Zhou Zhong thought for a while and nodded. He said, "I remember that there were 2 cases." Li Mu continued to ask, "Why did the Ministry of Justice repeatedly slack in investigating the case when 2 court officials were assassinated? If it weren't for the fact that Danyang and Hanyang counties failed to report the case several times and directly bypassed the Ministry of Justice and sent the memorial to the Secretariat this time, I don't know how long these 2 cases would be delayed." Zhou Zhong took a sip of tea and explained, "You know that a few months ago, the Ministry of Justice was busy because of the students of the academy and the case of Cui Ming. They could not even take care of the case in Luoyang County, let alone the distant Danyang County and Hanyang County. After that, they were delayed for a long time because of the imperial examination, so I forgot about these 2 cases. I only remembered them when you mentioned them today. I will immediately send someone to investigate this case." Li Mu's job was to supervise and remind the Ministry of Justice. Since Zhou Zhong had agreed, he had nothing else to say. The division of labor between the 3 provinces and 6 ministries was very clear. The Secretariat was responsible for formulating policies, but the specific implementation was decided by the 6 ministries. Li Mu walked out of the assistant minister's office and saw a figure standing outside the duty room opposite him. Wei Prung had once been the most typical hedonistic son of a wealthy family in the divine capital. However, today Li Mu had a whole new level of respect for him. The 2 of them looked at each other and didn't say anything. Although they were once enemies, the grudges of the past had long disappeared with time. Inside the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong looked at the director of the Ministry of Justice and said, "I'll leave the cases of Danyang County and Hanyang County to you." The director of the Ministry of Justice bowed and said, "Yes." The expression on his face was submissive, but he was complaining in his heart. In the beginning, it was Assistant Minister Zhou who didn't let him handle these 2 cases. Now it was still Assistant Minister Zhou who let him handle them. When the cases had just happened, it was obviously when there were the most clues and the easiest time to investigate. Now that half a year had passed, the 2 people's graves were already covered in grass. How was he supposed to investigate? Wasn't it obvious that Zhou Zhong was pushing the blame of his own negligence to him? Although he complained, he still had to do the work that was supposed to be done. After all, he was just a lowly director. At the right time, he took the initiative to take the blame for his superior's mistakes. This was the self-cultivation of a subordinate. The director of the Ministry of Justice walked out of the assistant minister's office and saw a figure standing outside the duty room opposite. He suddenly had an idea and said, "Manager Wei, come here." Wei Peng walked over and asked, "What orders do you have for me, Lord Yang?" The director of the Ministry of Justice patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't you like to handle cases? I happen to have 2 important cases here for you to handle. I give you 3 months to investigate the assassination of Ani County Magistrate and Tianhe County Deputy. If you can't find out, I'll deduct 2 months of your salary." At the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong picked up a brush and wrote a few runes on a piece of paper. The runes were crooked and couldn't form fulu at all. This was the result of not being able to calm his mind while writing the runes. Smack. He slammed the brush on the table and gripped the piece of paper in his hand. The veins on the back of his hand were bulging. After leaving the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu returned to the Li residence. The cracks on the Dao bell had almost been repaired. He was still searching for new spells that had never appeared in this world to help it become complete as soon as possible. Only a complete Dao bell could unleash its absolute defense. Even if there was a small crack, it would be a huge flaw in the eyes of a high-level cultivator. Li Mu only realized now that the group of old foxes had let him take away the Dao bell so easily. As expected, it wasn't that simple. An incomplete Dao bell wasn't very useful to the Fulu school. If it were to slowly repair itself, it would take at least 10 years or even decades. Li Mu thought that he had gained an advantage, but in reality, he had lost out again, unless he could keep the Dao bell by his side forever. Inside the Li residence, sometimes it rained, sometimes it snowed, and sometimes it thundered. However, because of the array's obstruction, the fluctuations of spiritual qi and magic power didn't spread outside the residence. The Dao bell was extremely excited. It grew to about 3 feet tall and completely enveloped Li Mu. The golden spots of light at the crack were repairing the cracks on the Dao bell bit by bit. After a while, Li Mu stopped the spell. The Dao bell turned back to the size of a palm and floated on his shoulder. The Empress walked out of the void and looked at the Dao bell that was happily revolving around Li Mu. She asked, "Can I take a look at it?" Apart from Li Mu, the Dao bell was more resistant to everyone. It swayed left and right, and buzzed a few times to express its resistance and unwillingness. Li Mu smacked the top of its head and said, "Go." The Dao bell buzzed a few more times before reluctantly flying toward the Empress. Zhou stretched out her hand. The Dao bell floated above her hand and didn't fall down. Zhou looked at it for a while, and then withdrew her hand. The Dao bell flew back to Li Mu's side. She looked at the Dao bell and said, "This bell should be a treasure from the ancient era. No wonder it has such power." The ancient era usually referred to the era 10,000 years ago. The Tao of cultivation had developed rapidly in the past 1,000 years. 1,000 years ago, the Tao of cultivation had experienced a barbaric period that lasted for thousands of years. Its development was extremely slow, and it only reached a peak in the past 1,000 years. However, countless cultivators discovered through research that in the ancient times 10,000 years ago, there was another peak in the path of cultivation. That was a golden age that was even more prosperous than the current cultivation world. There was enough evidence to prove that whether it was the Tao scripture, the Tao bell, or the treasures of the other sects, they were all products of the previous era. The Tao techniques of that era were even more powerful. Fulu pills, formations, weapon forging, and martial arts were also more mature. Today's cultivators could establish their own sects just by learning the basics. That was an era that the current cultivators envied and yearned for the most. Li Mu looked at the Tao bell in front of him. In this era, it could become the treasure of the Fulu school. However, in the ancient era, it might just be an ordinary treasure. As Li Mu sighed, the door of the Li residence was suddenly pushed open. A figure walked in from outside. Lu Hanyan looked around and asked, "Is this our new home?" Wanwan flew over from the corner and hugged her arm. She said happily, "Young mistress." Li Mu's figure flashed and appeared beside Lu Hanyan. He asked in surprise, "Why are you in the divine capital? Are you still going back to Baiyun Mountain?" Lu Hanyan smiled at him and said, "I'm not going back." Then she saw another figure standing in the courtyard. She asked, "She is?" Li Mu said, "This is Her Majesty the Empress." Then she introduced her to the Empress. "Your Majesty, this is my fiancé." Lu Hanyan had lived in the divine capital since she was young. She knew the meaning of the Empress better than Xiao Bai. She quickly bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Empress looked at them and said, "I still have some memorials to deal with in the palace. I won't disturb you." After she finished speaking, her figure gradually faded away in front of the two of them. Lu Hanyan had heard about Big Sister Zhou from Xiao Bai a long time ago. She asked Li Mu, "Has Her Majesty been coming to our house often recently?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Quite often. She treats Xiao Bai as her younger sister, and often comes to visit her." Lu Hanyan only asked one question. Then she stopped thinking about the empress. After 2 years, she returned to the divine capital. It seemed that nothing had changed, but in fact, everything had changed. Li Mu took her around the house. Lu Hanyan said, "This house is so big. It's spacious enough for a dozen people. It's just the 4 of us. Isn't it a waste?" Li Mu said, "There are 4 of us now. In the future, there might be 5, 6, 7, or 8. It won't be a waste then." Lu Hanyan looked up and asked, "What do you mean?" Li Mu said, "What I mean is, should we hire a few maids and servants? Also, the house is bigger. When relatives and friends come in the future, we should have rooms to entertain them." Lu Hanyan nodded and said, "That's true. But we don't need maids and servants. I don't like outsiders in the house. We can live with ourselves." Li Mu took her hand and said, "I'll listen to you." Lu Hanyan held him and said, "Come with me to the wonderful sound bar first. I want to see Xiao Qi and the others." Changle Palace. Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li were sorting the memorials from the various departments. There was a fluctuation in the space in the hall. The Empress appeared out of thin air. She looked at the 2 and said, "You 2 can leave first." Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li walked out of the hall. He was puzzled and asked, "Why did your majesty come back so early today?" Shangguan Li shook her head and said, "I don't know." Mr. Mei thought for a moment and said, "You stay in the palace. I'll go to the Li mansion to take a look." In the Changle Palace, Zhou calmly opened a memorial. Her eyes were slightly unfocused. She didn't know why, but there was an inexplicable ripple in her calm heart. This was the sign of the inner demon. This time, she used her spiritual power, but she couldn't erase this ripple no matter how hard she tried. She didn't calm down until she silently recited the mind-clearing spell. She looked troubled and murmured, "What's wrong with me?" Chapter 348. Li Mu guessed that Lu Hanyan came out of seclusion early and came to Chengdu without saying anything. She must have had the intention of checking up on him. Fortunately, Li Mu had kept himself clean for half a year in Chengdu. He was strict with himself and never flirted with women. Many people wanted to introduce their daughters to him, but he rejected them all. When she went out to ask around, all she heard was Li Mu's good points. As for seeing the Empress at home when she opened the door, Li Mu didn't even need to explain. The Empress was like a god in their hearts. She wouldn't think too much about it. Even if they were in the room or on the bed, as long as they were both wearing clothes, Lu Hanyan probably wouldn't think too much about it. Let alone him and the Empress in the courtyard. After being separated from her sisters at Great Music Bar for 2 years, Lu Hanyan went to Great Music Bar on the first day she returned to Chengdu. She met up with Yinin, Miao Miao, 16, 7, and other good friends. Li Mu invited them to a banquet at the fragrance bar to thank them for taking care of Lu Hanyan in the past. 16 sat beside Lu Hanyan and hugged her arm. She rested her head on Lu Hanyan's shoulder and said, "I thought I wouldn't see you again in this lifetime." Her other arm was hugged by 7. 7 looked at her and complained, "Sister Hanyan, you're so cruel. Last time you snuck away, I cried for a long time." Most of the girls at Great Music Bar were sold by their families when they were young. They grew up together and were close to each other even though they weren't family. After a while, the atmosphere started to liven up. The girls started to gossip about her, and Li Mu after asking her about her experiences in the past 2 years. "Sister Hanyan, how did you and brother-in-law meet? How did you end up together? When do you plan to get married? When you get married, I'll help you with the arrangements." They had already asked Li Mu about these things once, and it was still the same gossip. But gossip was gossip, and what they said was what Li Mu needed to consider at the moment. When Lu Hanyan decided to go to Mount Baiyun, Li Mu told her that the day she came to Chengdu was the day he would marry her. Li Mu had already calculated the date, but Lu Hanyan's return to Fairy's capital was a few months earlier than what they had agreed on. The date that Li Mu calculated was a little too late. He recalculated according to their birth characters. The closest auspicious day was the 9th of the next month, which was exactly 1 month away from today. Lu Hanyan's parents were long gone, and Li Mu had always been alone. After some discussion, they decided to keep things simple. They would just invite some friends from Fairy's capital to their house for a meal and drink the wedding wine. Lu Hanyan was supposed to sleep with Li Mu, but before the wedding, she became coy and insisted on sleeping in a different room from Li Mu, saying that she wanted to maintain the modesty of an unmarried woman. Women just like to pretend to be reserved. She had slept with him countless times in the past, and now she was lying to herself. However, Li Mu didn't have any objections. After all, they could sleep together every day in the future, and he wasn't in a hurry for half a month. After waiting for so long, this day finally came. A month later, he was also a man with a family. After being in Fairy's capital for half a year, Li Mu didn't make many friends, but made many enemies. After careful calculation, he realized that he didn't need to invite many people on the wedding day. The Fulu school had to inform them. Yuzhenzi was equivalent to Li Mu's half-mother-in-law. She had to come when her disciple got married. As for the peak masters, it wasn't certain. They had already been exploited by Lu Hanyan and Li Mu in turns. If they came this time, they might even take out the last of their family's assets. As for the White Demon King and Xuandu, although Li Mu wanted to inform them, his two elder brothers' whereabouts were elusive. Li Mu couldn't inform them even if he wanted to. Lu Hanyan's relatives and friends in Fairy's capital were her sisters at the wonderful music bar. Li Mu didn't know many people, so a few invitations were enough. The first person Li Mu thought of was naturally the Empress. However, as the ruler of a country, it was somewhat inappropriate for her to attend the wedding of her subjects. Even if she was willing, her subjects wouldn't be willing. Therefore, when he entered the palace, he only brought 2 invitations. At the entrance of Chang'e Palace, Li Mu handed one invitation to Mr. Mei and the other to Shangguan Li. He said, "My wedding is on the 9th of next month. Come to my wedding banquet if you have time." Congratulations. Sir Mei took the invitation card with a complicated look in his eyes. If she was a few years older, she would be Li Mu's mother. Now that Li Mu was about to get married, she was still alone. Shangguan Li also reached out to take the invitation without saying anything, which was her usual style. Li Mu gave Mr. Mei another invitation and said, "Sister Mei, help me give one to Mrs. Chu. By the way, is Her Majesty inside?" Lord Mei glanced at him and asked, "You still want to invite His Majesty? What are you thinking? If His Majesty appears at your wedding banquet, the spittle of the courtiers during the morning court session would be enough to drown you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Even if I can't invite Her Majesty, I still have to tell her." Mr. Mei waved his hand and said, "Go, go." Seeing Li Mu walk into Chang'e Palace, she glanced in the direction of the palace and sighed in melancholy. Li Mu walked into Chang'e Palace and saw the Empress sitting behind a table in front. She was probably reading memorials. Li Mu stood in the middle of the palace and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty." The Empress put down the memorials and looked up at him. She asked, "What is it?" Li Mu said, "My wedding will be on the 9th of next month. I wonder if Your Majesty would like to attend the wedding banquet." The Empress said in a low voice, "With my status, attending the wedding banquet will cause a lot of criticism. At that time, I'll ask Mei Wei to send a generous gift." Li Mu thought that if the Empress was willing to come, he could change her appearance. Since she said so, Li Mu didn't insist. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'll leave now." Li Mu left the palace. The Empress picked up another memorial and put it down after a while. She said in a low voice, "Mei Wei, come in." Mr. Mei walked in and asked, "Your Majesty, what are your orders?" The Empress thought for a while and asked, "Li Mu's wedding is a joyous occasion for him. Why don't I feel happy at all?" Mr. Mei looked up at her. He wanted to say something but didn't. The Empress said, "Say whatever you think. Even if you say something wrong, I won't blame you." Mr. Mei shook his head helplessly and said, "I think Your Majesty is too possessive of Li Mu." The Empress looked at him and asked, "What is possessiveness?" Mr. Mei said, "You only allow yourself to touch the things you like. Even if others get close to them, you won't be happy. This is a manifestation of possessiveness." The Empress thought for a while and seemed to realize something. She asked, "But why would I be possessive of him?" Mr. Mei said, "This is normal. Li Mu is young and promising. He can solve a lot of problems for your majesty. Your majesty trusts him and loves him. You hope that he will be loyal to you forever. When he gets closer to others than you, your majesty will be unhappy. This is human nature. She then added, if a woman likes a man, it's very easy for her to feel possessive towards him. She wouldn't want that man to have any contact with other women. This is a kind of possessiveness. Similarly, if two people are very good friends, when one of them finds out that the other has a new friend who's even closer to him, he'll feel uncomfortable. This is also a kind of possessiveness. Li Mu is His Majesty's right-hand man. It's not strange for His Majesty to feel possessive towards him. The Empress thought for a while and asked, are you saying that I shouldn't feel uncomfortable when Li Mu gets married? Mr. May thought for a while and said, I hope your Majesty understands that even if Li Mu gets married, it won't affect your relationship with him. He will still be loyal to you. Other than being your official, he has his own life. Your Majesty shouldn't feel uncomfortable because of this. The Empress was silent for a while and said, you are right. He is loyal to me. I should treat his wife the same way I treat him. Ask the Secretariat to write an edict and give her a 5th-rank title. Also, give her a golden hairpin and a pair of jade bracelets. Mr. May saw that she had thought it through. He smiled and asked, your Majesty, do you feel better now? Zhou frowned. She didn't feel better. Instead, she felt even worse. She thought for a while and said, forget it. He is the one who is loyal to me, not his wife. Don't ask the Secretariat to write an edict. Mr. May paused and asked tentatively, then the golden hairpin and jade bracelets. Zhou thought for a while and said, I won't give them to you either. Chapter 349. Li Mu walked out of Changel Palace with a puzzled look on his face. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the Empress wasn't happy about the news of his upcoming marriage. That didn't make sense. He was loyal to the Empress. Shouldn't the Empress be happy for him now that he had successfully resolved his marriage? Unless the Empress had a change of heart. But that didn't seem possible. They were still in love a few days ago. There was no reason for her to suddenly change her mind. Li Mu thought about it carefully and realized that he had been too careless this time. When it came to marriage, other people might think of it as happiness and bliss. However, the Empress' marriage was not blissful. She was used as a political bargaining chip by the Zhou clan, and married to the former crown prince. They were only husband and wife in name, but not in reality. She had a failed marriage. Wasn't Li Mu stabbing her in the heart by mentioning marriage in front of her? He hadn't thought about this matter. He should have thought about taking the Empress' feelings into consideration, he sighed. It was too late for regrets now. He had to be more careful in front of the Empress in the future. She was powerful, but her heart was fragile and sensitive. She was very similar to Lu Hanyan in this aspect. Even their experiences had something in common. They were both betrayed by their families. For someone who had experienced this, no matter how high their position was or how powerful they were, there would always be a sensitive and forbidden area in their hearts. Fortunately, Lu Hanyan had met him. Li Mu would use the rest of his life to heal the wounds she had suffered when she was young. The Empress, on the other hand, was not so lucky. No matter how powerful she was, no matter how high her status was, and no matter how powerful she was, she would never be able to obtain a man like him. Li Mu didn't stop when he passed by the Secretary's department. He walked past it directly. Li Mu was now a member of the Secretary's department and had many colleagues here. However, Li Mu only had a nodding acquaintance with some of them. Some of them seemed to be friendly on the surface, but they were actually mortal enemies. Li Mu hoped to see friends he truly recognized at his wedding. He would invite the constables of the Fairies Department, not the officials of the Secretary's Department. The Fairies Department. When the constables heard the news, they all congratulated him. Congratulations, boss. No wonder the boss doesn't care about the women in Fairies Capital. It turns out that she's already taken. Hee, if this news gets out, who knows how many women in the Fairies Capital will cry. Inside the yamen, Li Si cupped his hands to Li Mu and said, Congratulations. Li Mu asked, What about you? When do you plan to get married? Li Si said, I'll wait for Miao Miao to go down the mountain. In a few days, I'll be returning to the North County. Do you want to pick up Zhang Shan? Li Mu nodded and said, when you come back, take him with you. It had been a long time since the three heroes of the Yangqiu County government gathered together. After that farewell, the three of them were no longer the same. Zhang Shan was different from Li Mu and Li Si. He wasn't interested in cultivation. Nothing was more attractive to him than making money. Li Si put his hand on Li Mu's shoulder and said, since you've decided to get married, you'll have to settle down. Li Mu was stunned. When have I not settled down? All the people in Fairy's capital knew that his primordial yang was still there. He had kept his chastity for Lu Hanyan. Was this not settling down? Li Si shook his head and didn't say anything else. After leaving the Fairy's department, Li Mu returned to the North Court. He didn't go back to the Li Mansion but to the Zhang Mansion first. Before he left Fairy's capital last time, the Empress had rewarded Zhang Chun with a house with 3 courtyards. Although it was still a distance away from his dream of a house with 5 courtyards, it was still the envy of countless officials in the court to own a house with 3 courtyards in a place like the North Court where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Li Mu knocked on the door. Soon footsteps came from inside. Zhang Chun opened the door and said, Li Mu, when did you come back to Fairy's capital? Come in and have a seat. Li Mu said, I just came back. I won't be coming in. I'm here to deliver something to you. Li Mu took out an invitation and handed it to him. He said, I'm getting married next month. Remember to bring Madame Zhang and Miss Yi to the wedding banquet. Zhang Chun was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He said in shock, wedding. Li Mu was also stunned. He asked, is there a problem? Zhang Chun said in disbelief, will the Zhou family agree? Will the Xiao family agree? Even if they agree, all the officials in the court won't agree. Li Mu looked at him strangely. He was marrying Lu Hanyan, not the Empress. Why did the Zhou family and the Xiao family agree? What right did all the officials have to object? Zhang Chun flipped open the invitation and was stunned for a long time before he came back to his senses and said, so it's with Miss Lu? Li Mu said, who else can it be? Zhang Chun shook his head and said in disappointment, no one. Li Mu frowned and asked, old Zhang, you don't seem too happy about my marriage? No, of course not. Zhang Chun showed a smile that was uglier than crying. He said, congratulations, congratulations. I wish you and Lady Lu grow old together and have a child soon. After a while, Zhang Chun saw Li Mu off and closed the door. He leaned against the door and sighed. Madame Zhang walked out of the room and asked worriedly, what happened? Why do you look like that? Zhang Chun sighed again and said, Madam, I'm afraid there's no hope for our 5-zoned house. Li Mu returned home and found that Lu Hanyan had already finished cooking and was waiting for him in the yard. Usually he was the one who cooked at home. When the Empress came, the situation suddenly changed. He was not used to it. Lu Hanyan made all the dishes that Li Mu liked. She said with a satisfied smile, today, I went shopping with Xiao Bai and Wan Wan and heard the people talking about you. The people of Shendu were his solid support. Li Mu asked calmly, what did they say about me? Lu Hanyan said, they said that you are righteous, not afraid of power, and that you are a good official. Li Mu asked, what else did they say? Lu Hanyan said with satisfaction, they also said that you are clean and do not get close to women. Li Mu looked at her and said, do you believe me now? Even if you don't believe in Xiao Bai, don't you believe in all the people of Shendu? I believe you, I believe you. Lu Hanyan picked up a piece of tofu and put it in front of his mouth. She said, open your mouth, this is your reward. Li Mu was very busy these days. There was only a month before the wedding, but there were many things that needed to be prepared in advance. There were many details involved. Especially for people like him and Lu Hanyan who had never been married before, they did not know how to do it. Among the people he knew, only Zhang Chun and the Empress had experience. He definitely could not ask the Empress. Firstly, she definitely did not need to prepare for her wedding. Secondly, he had already stabbed the Empress in the chest a few days ago. If he asked her now, wouldn't it be the same as rubbing salt on her wound? As for Zhang Chun, he seemed to have encountered something recently and was in low spirits. Li Mu did not bother him anymore. Fortunately, with the help of Wan Wan and Xiao Bai, Although the preparation was slow, everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. In the Li residence, Li Mu was busy and happy. In the Ministry of Justice, Wei Peng scratched his head in frustration and pulled out a handful of hair. The assassination of the officials in Anhui County and Tianhe County really made his head ache. He was familiar with the law and good at judging cases, but not good at investigating cases. Wei Peng felt that the imperial court should separate judging and investigating cases, because they were not the same thing. Judging a case tested the officials' foundation in the law, as well as their understanding and application of the law. As for investigating a case, it tested the officials' insight, logical reasoning, and thinking ability. He was good at judging cases, but not at investigating. Wasn't it deliberately making things difficult for him to find the murderers based on just 2 case files? The deaths of these 2 officials could be due to personal grudges, or because they were heartless officials and aroused the resentment of the people. They were killed by cultivators who could not bear to see them get rid of evil for the people. This kind of thing happened in every dynasty. Wei Peng flipped through the resumes of the 2 officials that he had copied from the Ministry of Personnel. He planned to start with the latter possibility. However, the resumes of the 2 officials were very clean. Their ratings over the years were above A, and they did not seem like corrupt officials who took advantage of the people. However, he also knew that the ratings of the Ministry of Personnel's resumes were no better than a piece of scrap paper. If he really wanted to know how these 2 officials were like, he would probably have to go to Hanyang County and Danyang County to investigate personally. Wei Peng rubbed his forehead and leaned back in his chair. He was even more frustrated. These 2 cases had happened a long time ago. Even if he went to these 2 counties, he would not be able to find anything useful. His eyes inadvertently swept across the resumes of the 2 officials who were killed, and his gaze suddenly froze. He sat up again and took the resumes. After looking through them carefully, he finally found some clues. The deaths of the magistrate of Anhui County and the deputy of Tianhe County were 2 unrelated cases, but they were related. For example, the 2 of them were once in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. Not only that, they were officials in the Ministry of Personnel at the same time and were promoted in the same year. One was promoted to the magistrate of Anhui County, and the other to the deputy of Tianhe County. It was definitely an exceptional promotion from grade 9 to grade 7. They were officials in the Ministry of Personnel at the same time, were promoted in an exceptional way, and were almost assassinated at the same time. Wei Peng stood up suddenly and muttered, "This is definitely not a coincidence." Chapter 350. At the Ministry of Personnel. An official walked out of the watchroom and looked at the person standing in the courtyard. He asked, "Manager Wei, what brings you to the Ministry of Personnel today?" Wei Peng went straight to the point. "There are 2 cases in the Ministry of Justice, and I need to investigate the details of 2 officials. May I trouble you to help me check their files?" The official asked, "Which county are they from?" "Please have a seat, Manager Wei. I'll arrange for someone to help you." Wei Peng passed him a piece of paper and said, "Danyang County's Anhui County Magistrate Ding Yun. Hanyang County's Tianhe County's Minister Ho Bai." The manager of the Ministry of Personnel arranged for his subordinate to check the files of the people Wei Peng wanted. He sat in the watchroom and started chatting with Wei Peng. The Wei family used to belong to the old party. However, Wei Peng's father was demoted because he was involved in the case of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights framing Li Mu. He was never hired again. Wei Peng thought that the Wei family would disappear from Luoyang. He did not expect that after the imperial examinations, Wei Peng would be specially recruited by the Ministry of Justice. Although his rank was not high and he was a manager like him, it was said that Assistant Minister Zhou appreciated him. His future was naturally brighter than his. Wei Peng was preoccupied with the case, and was not in the mood to chat with the manager of the Ministry of Personnel. Fortunately, the subordinate soon brought over the files of the 2 officials. The files used by the Ministry of Justice could be copied. However, a lot of the content would be omitted when they were taken back. Wei Peng decided to just read them in the Ministry of Personnel. The files in the Ministry of Personnel were obviously much more detailed. Not only did it record their birthplace, family, and other information, but it also recorded every assessment, promotion, and transfer after they became officials in detail. After looking through it carefully, Wei Peng found more suspicious points. There were many similarities between the two. They were both students of Baichuan Academy and left the academy in the same year to become officials. They were both managers of the Ministry of Personnel. They were promoted at the same time and were assassinated at the same time. Even the way they died was very similar. It was difficult to explain this with the word coincidence. After returning to the Ministry of Justice, Wei Peng told Zhou Zhong about his findings. Zhou Zhong's index finger gently tapped on the table as he asked, "So you suspect that these two cases were done by the same person, and that the mastermind has a grudge with these two people?" Wei Peng nodded and said, "It's impossible for two cases to have so many coincidences. The possibility of a vendetta is very high, but without more clues, finding the murderer is like finding a needle in a haystack." Zhou Zhong said, "The Ministry of Justice is only in charge of investigating the case. Pursuing the culprit is the imperial court's business. The Ministry of Justice has already investigated up to this point. Let's leave the rest to the imperial court." Wei Peng bowed. Yes. Wei Peng actually wanted to investigate further, but since the assistant minister had spoken, he didn't insist. It was better to hand over the case as soon as possible, lest he lose all his hair at such a young age. After Wei Peng left, Zhou Zhong stood up several times before slowly sitting down again. He seemed a little anxious. In the Hall of Governmental Affairs, Li Mu unhurriedly took out the new report from the Ministry of Justice. These yamen still needed to be beaten up from time to time, so that they would know how to do things properly. After he had urged the Ministry of Justice the last time, the Ministry of Justice had given a reply regarding the assassination of the two officials in just a few days. Li Mu hadn't thought that these two unrelated cases would have such a connection. In this way, when the imperial court sent people to pursue the culprit, they would have a clear direction. The matter of pursuing the culprit was the responsibility of the Ministry of Worship. The Ministry of Worship was an organization independent of the imperial court. There were experts recruited by the imperial court from all over the world, and they specialized in dealing with important cases that the local government couldn't handle. After the incident in Yang County, the people who went to capture Xiao Yu were the Ministry of Worship. Li Mu handed the report from the Ministry of Justice to the Hall of Governmental Affairs Assistant Minister Lu Yi. Lu Yi quickly gave an order for someone to send it to the Ministry of Worship. At this point, Li Mu had fulfilled his duty. He returned to his own yamen. Not long after sitting down, he felt a familiar aura coming from outside the Hall of Governmental Affairs. He walked out of the Hall of Governmental Affairs yamen and saw Mr. May standing at the door. He asked, "Sister May, what's the matter?" Mr. May glanced at him and said, "Nothing. I just haven't seen you in a few days, so I came to see you." Li Mu scratched his head. "How many days has it been?" Mr. May said, "You really do have a wife. You forgot about His Majesty. You haven't been to Chengal Palace for 5 days." Li Mu corrected her. "What do you mean I forgot about His Majesty, because I have a wife? I'm just worried about irritating His Majesty." Mr. May asked, "Why would you irritate His Majesty?" Li Mu said in a low voice, "You also know that His Majesty's marriage is not that happy. My wife is so beautiful, and her marriage is so happy. If she appeared in front of His Majesty every day, His Majesty might feel bad." Mr. May hit him on the head angrily and said, "If His Majesty hears this, be careful of your butt." Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Didn't you say that His Majesty's heart is broader than the sea?" Mr. May's eyes wandered and said, "Even if His Majesty is broad-minded, it is not a reason for you to talk about His Majesty behind his back." What nonsense was this? The Empress' marriage was not happy to begin with. Li Mu was just stating the truth. He was taking care of the Empress' emotions. As long as the Empress was reasonable, she would not blame him. Among all the women that Li Mu was familiar with, there was no one who was more reasonable than the Empress. Merely the fact that she had taken the initiative to admit her mistakes and change after realizing her mistakes had already defeated the majority of women. Not only that, ever since Lu Hanyan came to Shendu, she never entered Li Mu's dream again, nor did she come to the Li mansion. It seemed that even the Empress knew that she should not disturb the couple's private time. Mr. Mei shook his head and looked at Li Mu. He said, regardless of whether His Majesty is broad-minded or not, you can't neglect His Majesty just because you have a wife. Did you forget how you felt when His Majesty neglected you last time? Li Mu thought about it carefully. After Lu Hanyan came back to Chengdu, he did seem to neglect the Empress. The Empress's heart was not as broad as it seemed. Maybe she was already holding a grudge against Li Mu. When they passed by the market, Li Mu bought a crucian carp and a piece of tofu. He was going to make crucian carp and tofu soup the next morning. When they got home, Lu Hanyan looked at the fish in his hand and said in surprise, "We already have one fish at home. Why did you buy another one?" Li Mu said, "I'm saving this one to make soup for tomorrow. I'll give it to His Majesty during the morning court." Lu Hanyan asked in confusion, "Why are you making soup for His Majesty?" Li Mu put the fresh fish in a small water tank and explained, "It's a long story. The real His Majesty is not like what you see." Li Mu told Lu Hanyan about the Empress. After hearing the story, Lu Hanyan held Li Mu's arm and said in shock and sympathy, "If that's the case, His Majesty is too pitiful." Lu Hanyan and the Empress had similar experiences, but they were also different. She was abandoned by her parents because of her purine body. She had not seen her family since she was a child. The Empress was used by her family more than once. Even now, the Zhou family was still using her to achieve their goal of stealing the country. The similar experiences made Lu Hanyan feel pity for her. In her opinion, the Empress was more pitiful than herself. Li Mu continued, "When you were not in Luoyang, His Majesty treated me very well. If it were not for His Majesty's protection, I would not have been able to deal with the old and new parties, as well as the academy. The house we are living in now is a gift from His Majesty. His Majesty often teaches me cultivation, and has rewarded me with many things. Therefore, I want to do more for His Majesty." Lu Hanyan nodded and said, "That's what I should do. Sleep a little more tomorrow morning. I'll make the soup for His Majesty." Li Mu said, "Let's do it together." The two of them had to wake up together tomorrow morning, so it was natural for them to sleep together at night. Lu Hanyan seemed to have forgotten what she had said a few days ago. At night, she climbed into Li Mu's bed again. In her sleep, she still held his hand tightly. Li Mu kissed her gently on the forehead and closed his eyes. Late at night, the space in the courtyard fluctuated, and a figure slowly appeared. She took a step forward and suddenly stopped. She did not enter the room as usual. The space in the courtyard fluctuated again, and the figure slowly faded away. In the room, Li Mu and Lu Hanyan were sleeping in each other's arms. Thousands of miles away, in Baiyu County of Yushan Commandery, the county magistrate of Baiyu County suddenly woke up from his sleep. He looked at the figure in his room and said in shock, "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the county office? Leave immediately." What answered him was an incomparably sharp swordlight. Under the sword, the county magistrate of Baiyu County was beheaded. A shadow flew out from his corpse. His primordial spirit looked at the figure in the room in horror, and said in a shrill voice, "I am an official of the imperial court. If you dare to kill me, the imperial court will not let you go. No matter where you run to, you can't escape death." Boom! Before he could finish his sentence, a purple thunderbolt suddenly exploded in the room. The county magistrate's primordial spirit was struck by the thunderbolt and completely disappeared. A moment later, several constables rushed into the room. Soon, voices came from the room. Someone come quickly. Sir, there was an assassination attempt." Chapter 351. Jade Mountain County. The news of the Baiyu County magistrate being assassinated shook the entire Jade Mountain County. How many years had it been since such a vile thing as murdering an official of the imperial court had happened in Yushan County? The last time they heard of such a thing was in North County Yang County. They didn't expect Jade Mountain County to encounter it so soon. The county magistrate was furious and ordered all the constables to search every village and city in the county to find the culprit. Even if they only provided clues, they would be rewarded handsomely. Jade Mountain County, Zhongshan County. The assassination of the Bayou County magistrate had affected the entire Jade Mountain County. Zhongshan County was no exception. The county Yaman's constables and Min Zhuang had already checked the villages one by one, looking for suspicious people. Within the county, all the inns, brothels, and places that might be hiding people were searched 5 or 6 times in a day. The Zhongshan County magistrate hid in the county office and didn't come out. He wasn't stingy with spiritual jades and activated the formation outside the county office to its strongest state. He also carried the protective treasure given by the imperial court with him to deal with any unexpected situations. The county magistrate of Bayou County was inexplicably infiltrated by someone and destroyed in body and soul. That thief could be an assassin from the Devil's Doctrine, or a cultivator, who hated the imperial court. If he could kill the county magistrate of Bayou County, he could also kill the county magistrate of Zhongshan County. The Zhongshan County magistrate sat in the office and looked at a middle-aged man. He said, "Magistrate Huang, I suggest you stay in the county office. It's obviously not peaceful recently. I heard that Hanyang County and Danyang County officials were also killed. It'll be safer if everyone stays together." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "I'm just a magistrate. Even if it's a culprit, I won't care. It's fine." With that, he slowly walked out of the county office. The Zhongshan County magistrate looked at his back with dissatisfaction. Of course, he didn't keep Magistrate Huang in the county office for his safety. It was only because Magistrate Huang had level 4 supernatural power that he could feel more at ease with such an expert in the county office. Magistrate Huang walked out of the county office and passed through 2 streets before arriving in front of a house. As a magistrate, he didn't choose to live in the county office. Instead, he rented a small courtyard in a remote area of the county. He rented it for 14 years. He opened the courtyard door and entered. He saw a figure standing in the courtyard. The figure was tall and slender, and from the silhouette, it should be a woman. The woman stood with her back facing the door. She wore a conical bamboo hat on her head. A black veil hung from the edge of the hat, covering her face. County Magistrate Huang looked at the figure and paused for a moment. The next moment he walked into the yard and closed the door. He looked up at the woman's back and shook his head. "I've waited here for 14 years. The woman turned around and looked at him through the black veil on his bamboo hat. There was a trace of melancholy on County Magistrate Huang's face as he muttered to himself. "For the past 14 years, I haven't had a good night's sleep. I knew that you would find me in the end. I wanted you to come, but at the same time, I didn't want you to come. Why?" The woman's voice was cold, as if it didn't contain any human emotions. County Magistrate Huang said slowly, "The past 14 years have been too painful for me. I hope that you can set me free. However, I also know that if you come to find me, it means that you've already embarked on this path. This is a path of no return. The moment you set foot on it, there's no turning back." He looked at the woman and said, "Those who have passed away forever. Those who are still alive must live on even more." The woman said faintly, "Some people don't deserve to live." County Magistrate Huang was silent for a moment before he nodded and said, "Some people don't deserve to live, but can you let my family go? That matter has nothing to do with them." The woman was silent for a moment before she said calmly, "All right. Thank you." County Magistrate Huang heaved a sigh of relief and said, 14 years ago, I sent them back to their hometown. I've waited here alone for you for 14 years. You've finally come." His voice was calm, and there was a trace of relief in it. The woman looked at him and asked, "Why?" County Magistrate Huang knew what she was asking. He shook his head and said, "It's meaningless to talk about this now. Everyone has to be responsible for their mistakes. I'm indebted to you, sir. I've let you down." He faced the woman and knelt on the ground. There was a trace of relief in his voice as he said softly, "I'm sorry." After he finished speaking, his head slowly drooped. At this moment, this fourth realm cultivator's 3 souls and 7 spirits dissipated. A day later, in the courtyard, County Magistrate Yushan stood in front of County Magistrate Huang's kneeling corpse. His expression was extremely gloomy. He gritted his teeth and said, "Arrogant, too arrogant. If I don't catch you, I'm not human." The Zhongshan County Magistrate lamented, "Sir Huang, "Oh, Sir Huang. I've advised you to stay in the county office with me. Why didn't you listen? Great, now you've been killed by a criminal." County Magistrate Yushan looked at County Magistrate Huang's corpse with a trace of doubt on his face. He frowned and said, "County Magistrate Huang's death doesn't seem like a homicide. It seems like his soul dissipated on its own." County Magistrate Yushan asked, "What reason does he have to do this?" County Magistrate Yushan shook his head and said, "I don't know. First he killed someone, then he disguised it as a suicide. Did he think he could fool me with such a clumsy method?" Within a few days, 2 officials under his jurisdiction had died. County Magistrate Yushan's mana was surging. It was obvious that he was extremely angry. He said gloomily, "You stay in County Magistrate Yushan and continue to track down the murderer. I'm going to Fairy's capital. I must make the Imperial Court investigate this matter thoroughly and give the people of my county an explanation." Li residence. Li Mu carried the lunchbox and walked out of the house. He had planned to bring breakfast for the Empress the next day. However, that morning, he and Lu Hanyan were entangled in bed and missed the time. He had no choice but to raise the carp for another 3 days. He could not bring the fish soup to court. Before morning court, he passed the lunchbox to Mr. May. Mr. May opened the lunchbox and smelled it. He glanced at Li Mu and said, "At least you have a conscience." In the past, the morning court was mostly about trivial matters. There were no major issues. However, compared to the past, there were more unexpected situations today. There were officials from all over the country. Recently, there were more signs of demon sect activities in their jurisdictions. This caused some instability in the counties. County Magistrate Yushan even came to Fairy's capital personally to report the murder of 2 officials in County Magistrate Yushan. The officials were all filled with righteous indignation. Murdering an official of the Imperial Court. We must not let them off lightly. Damn demon sect. They are indeed a great threat to the Great Zhou. One day, the Imperial Court will completely eradicate the evildoers of the demon sect. Some were indignant, while others were puzzled. That's strange. Although the demon sect has always wanted to overthrow the Imperial Court, they rarely attack officials directly. An official thought for a moment and asked, could it be that the top scholar killed too many demon sect masters a few days ago and attracted the revenge of the demon sect? Once this was said, it triggered a new round of discussion. What's going on? You still don't know? It's said that when Commander Shangguan and the others were chasing after Cui Ming, they accidentally fell into Cui Ming's trap. It was Zhuang Yuanlang who helped them escape, took down Cui Ming, and even killed an expert from the Devil Sect. After that, Zhuang Yuanlang was listed as a wanted man by the Devil Sect. It said that the Devil Sect put a very high bounty on his head and attracted a lot of experts, but they were all killed by him. He killed more than 25th level experts, and there's even a rumor that even the Great Elder of the Soul Sect, the 6th level Nether Hell Saint, died in his hands. That's too exaggerated. More than 25th Realm Masters and 1 6th Realm Master. The top scholar's cultivation is only at the 4th realm. Although his cultivation isn't high, he must have a treasure bestowed by Her Majesty. I heard that in Jiangyin County, someone even saw the Empress's avatar descend. That Nether Hell Saint must have died in the hands of the Empress avatar. In the Imperial Court, the officials were discussing fervently. The topic quickly shifted to the demon sect and Li Mu. Many people were shocked to the point of disbelief when they heard that Li Mu had killed dozens of demon sect 5th realm masters. More than 25th realm masters. Among the 100 people standing in the Golden Palace, there were only 25th realm masters. Even if they were to calculate, it might not be enough for Li Mu to kill. In the Great Zhou's 36 counties, the county governors and county ministers were all 5th realm masters. There were less than 100 of them in total. If more than 20 of them were killed by the demon sect, the transcending state masters of the Great Zhou would probably join forces and attack the demon sect's lair. Moreover, other than the death of more than 25th realm masters, the demon sect also lost a branch sect's 1st elder and a 6th realm master. If they were to calculate, if they only killed 2 minor officials of the Imperial Court to vent their anger, then the demon sect was already very rational. They were even more rational than the Great Zhou Court. It was inconceivable that a fourth realm cultivator could achieve such a feat, however. It also proved how much Her Majesty doted on Li Mu. She must have given Li Mu countless high-level fulu and magic treasures. She even sacrificed her own cultivation and sent her avatar to help him. Was this how a favored official should be treated? Even a favored concubine wouldn't be treated this way, right? Since ancient times, the emperors who were known for their incompetence actually doted on their demon concubines and demon empresses so much. Of course, their countries didn't escape the fate of being destroyed in the end. The 25th realm masters of the demon sect, including the Nether Saint, were killed by a fourth realm cultivator. They must have felt very aggrieved when they died. Some of the officials even felt that their deaths were unjust, because their opponent wasn't Li Mu, but the Great Zhou Imperial Treasury. They even guessed that if the person who wanted to kill Li Mu was a 7th realm master of the demon sect, the Empress would probably come personally. So many experts of the demon sect had died, but the officials were only shocked for a moment. 2 7th rank officials had died, but the investigation had to be carried out. This was the principle of the Imperial Court. The Department of Offerings had sent 5 Blessed Realm offerings to Yu County with the Yushan County chief to chase after the culprit. This was enough to show how much importance the Imperial Court attached to this case. When Li Mu walked out of Crepe Myrtle Hall, he was very unconvinced. He had killed so many experts of the demon sect. This was a great contribution to the Imperial Court. Some bastard officials even wanted to blame the deaths of the 2 officials of Yushan County on him. What did this have to do with him? If the demon sect wanted to take revenge, he couldn't stop them. However, if those 2 officials had really died because of the demon sect's revenge, Li Mu would still feel very apologetic. If the trash of the demon sect wanted to take revenge, they could come to him. Why did they have to vent their anger on innocent people? When his cultivation improved a little more, he would equip the Fulu school with a bunch of heaven-rank Fulu. Sooner or later he would wipe out the nests of the 10 demon sects. After the Imperial Court, Zhou Yi returned to Chang'e Palace. Mr. Mei walked in with a soup bowl. "Your Majesty, this is the soup that Li Mu made for you. He gave it to me before the Imperial Court. He also told Your Majesty to drink it while it's hot." Zhou Yi could already smell her favorite Christian carp tofu soup. It had been a long time since she drank the soup personally made by Li Mu. After Mr. Mei filled a bowl for her, she picked up the spoon and took a small sip. Then her brows furrowed slightly. "That's not right." Mr. Mei was surprised. "What's wrong? Doesn't it taste good?" Zhou Yi shook her head. "It tastes good, but it doesn't taste like what he made." She closed her eyes and counted with her fingers. Her expression was somewhat complicated. After drinking another mouthful of soup, she looked at Mr. Mei and said, "I think it's better to give her a title of nobility." Mr. Mei froze for a moment. He quickly realized who she was talking about. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Then the jade bracelet and the golden hairpin?" "No." Chapter 352. Mr. Mei's visit today surprised Li Mu. She was here to reward Lu Hanyan on behalf of the Empress. Li Mu was a 5th rank official, and Lu Hanyan was also given a 5th rank title by the Empress. Although the rank of a lady was lower than that of her husband, there were many officials in the Imperial Court, and not all the wives of officials could have such an honor. In a family, the husband was an official in the Imperial Court, and the wife was a lady. Only then could she be considered to have entered the circle of nobles. Li Mu had no interest in entering this circle. He just felt that this set of ladies' clothes looked beautiful on Lu Hanyan. Yinin, Miao Miao, and the others happened to be in the residence. They urged Lu Hanyan to put on the dress, and then surrounded her with envy. Like officials, a lady had a rank and salary. For a woman, having a lady's title was equivalent to entering the ranks of nobles. Yinin looked around and asked curiously, "Is this the only dress?" Lu Hanyan asked. "What else?" Yinin said. "Even if there isn't any precious jewelry, there should be silk or something like that. Her Majesty is too stingy." Lu Hanyan defended the Empress and said, "Don't say that about Her Majesty. I didn't do anything, and I got a lady's title. This is already Her Majesty's special gift." Miao Miao said, "Although you didn't do anything, brother-in-law did a lot of things. It's the same as what you did." In a few days, you will be a real family. There was less than half a month before the wedding. Li Mu had prepared most of the things that needed to be prepared. Inin Miao Miao and the others were here to accompany Lu Hanyan to shop. It just so happened that Li Mu was also on break, so he followed behind them and helped them carry their things. Shopping with women was a very troublesome thing. Li Mu bought things decisively and straightforwardly. Once he saw something he liked, he would pay the bill. They, on the other hand, had to pick and choose and shop around. Even though she was not short of money now, she still enjoyed this kind of thing. Lu Hanyan and the girls walked out of a rouge shop. On the street, a young man suddenly walked up and asked in surprise, "Miss Hanyan, is it really you?" Lu Hanyan looked at him and asked doubtfully. "You are," the young man said. "I am Du Ming, a student of the Myriad Scroll Academy. I used to listen to you play a lot. Don't you remember me?" Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and replied politely, "Oh, it's young master, do I remember?" Du looked at her and asked, "Miss Hanyan, are you still there? Ever since you left, there weren't many musicians who were worth listening to." Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "I'm not there anymore." Du Ming asked, "I don't know which music house Miss Hanyan is playing in now. In the future, I will definitely support you." "Oh right, I'm holding a banquet at the Fragrance House today. I don't know if Miss Hanyan can do me the honor." As soon as he finished speaking, someone suddenly patted his shoulder. Du Ming frowned. When he turned around, he was immediately frightened. He said in a trembling voice, "Li Mu, what do you want?" The people who were taken out of the academy by Li Mu were now either dead or sentenced. This caused him to be nervous when he saw Li Mu. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Treating my wife to a meal. I want to ask, what do you want to do?" Du Ming looked at him and then looked at Lu Hanyan. He was shocked, but he quickly came back to his senses. He immediately said, Sorry, I didn't know Miss Hanyan was your wife. I didn't mean to offend you. I'll leave now. After he finished speaking, he quickly left and didn't dare to look at Lu Hanyan again. Seeing Du Ming run away, Inin smiled and said, "It's good to have brother-in-law. In the past, these people were always pestering us and couldn't be chased away. Now let's see who dares to bother Sister Hanyan." Not far away, Du Ming had already run far away and was still in shock. A few young people stood in place. One of them looked at him and asked, "Didn't you say you saw someone familiar? Why did you come back so quickly? Did you get the wrong person?" Du Ming looked in a certain direction and still couldn't believe it. He muttered, "How did Miss Hanyan become his wife?" When they heard this, they were all stunned. "What? That Li Mu has a wife? Didn't they say he was still a virgin? Miss Hanyan? Could it be the top musician of the Great Music Workshop 2 years ago? Didn't she leave Chengdu? How did she get involved with Li Mu?" The name Lu Hanyan was quite famous in the divine capital. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also very good at music. She was loved by some people who liked music. Later on, she left the divine capital for no reason. In a small area, she caused quite a commotion. Other than liking her music, Du Ming also admired her. At that time, he was disappointed for a long time. This time, when he saw her in the divine capital, he was filled with surprise and joy. The flame in his heart that had been extinguished was reignited. Then, it was extinguished by Li Mu's cold water. He looked in a certain direction and sighed. What a pity, what a pity. When the two of them returned home after shopping, Li Mu was carrying something in one hand and holding her hand with the other. A commoner saw this and said in surprise, "Lord Li, this lady is..." Li Mu smiled and explained, "She's my wife." The commoner was puzzled. "Is Lord Li married?" Li Mu replied, "Not yet, but it will be next month. If you have time, come and join the wedding." "Congratulations, Lord Li, congratulations. Mrs. Li is so beautiful. She and Lord Li are a perfect match. I wish Lord Li and Mrs. Li a long life together and have a child soon." They walked through the streets and alleys. From time to time, the commoners would ask questions. Li Mu patiently explained to each and every one of them. Listening to the blessings of the commoners, Lu Hanyan's face was filled with shyness, but her eyes were filled with happiness. Li Mu had always been a hot topic in the divine capital. In the past half a year, Every discussion in the divine capital was related to him. Once the news of him getting married on the 9th of the next month spread out, it quickly became the topic of the commoners' discussion. I wonder which lady is so lucky to be able to marry Lordly. I really envy her. Sigh, poor old man's 3 beautiful daughters. They're about to give up. I wonder if Lordly will accept concubines? Forget it. Lordly has done us a favor. If you want to repay kindness with enmity, we won't allow it. I saw that lady just now. She's very beautiful. She's worthy of Lordly. Lordly reminded me of that Lordly from more than 10 years ago. He was also a good official who made decisions for the commoners. I think his surname was also Lee. Unfortunately, sigh. I remember too. Unfortunately, Lordly didn't meet a wise ruler. The previous emperor wasn't Her Majesty the Empress. The house Lordly is living in now is the Lee residence from back then. Those who killed him back then will die a horrible death. Shoot, you don't want to live anymore. If someone hears you, even if you have 10 heads, it won't be enough to chop them off. The 7th of the 10th month. Today was not a special day. The residences of some officials and nobles were as usual. However, the market where the commoners lived was as lively as a festival. 2 days later was the day of Lord Lee's wedding. From today onwards, many shops in the divine capital would sell their goods at a discount to celebrate the occasion. Some commoners hung large red lanterns in front of their houses, even though there was no joyous occasion. The streets and alleys were pasted with the word happy. Those who knew would naturally know that Lord Lee was getting married. Those who didn't know would think that His Majesty was appointing an empress. Even when the previous emperor appointed an empress, the commoners didn't celebrate spontaneously like this. Countless officials in the imperial court didn't like Li Mu's way of doing things. However, when they saw this scene, they couldn't help but admire him from the bottom of their hearts. As an official, what more could he ask for? As the 9th of the 10th month approached, the streets and alleys were discussing the upcoming wedding. A woman wearing a bamboo hat slowly walked onto the streets of the divine capital. Although her attire was different from ordinary people, it didn't attract any special attention. There were always some people who didn't want to show their faces in public for some special reason. It wasn't uncommon for them to wear veils or cloaks when they went out. The woman seemed to be very familiar with the divine capital. She walked through the streets with great familiarity. Finally, she walked into the North Court and stood in front of a tall door. The words Lee Residence were written on the plaque in front of the door. The woman's gaze passed through the black veil of her bamboo hat and stared at the 2 words for a long time. This family seemed to have a joyous occasion recently. There was red satin hanging on the plaque. The word happy was also pasted on the 2 large red lanterns. Creak. The door opened from the inside. An unusually beautiful girl around 18 or 19 years old walked out. She asked in confusion, "Sister, who are you looking for?" The woman didn't answer. She slowly turned and left. Xiaobai closed the door and walked back. Wanwan poked her head out of the garden and asked, "Who is it?" Xiaobai shook her head and said, "I don't know. She must have entered the wrong door." Outside the door, the woman walked 100 steps before a peddler carrying a load walked over. The woman stopped the peddler and pointed at the residence in front. She asked softly, "Excuse me, may I ask who lives in the Lee residence in front?" The peddler thought that someone was buying and was just feeling happy. However, when he heard that the woman was asking for directions, he became rather displeased. However, when he looked in the direction the woman was pointing at, he immediately beamed with joy again. He put down his load and said, "Miss, you must be a foreigner. If you're from the divine capital, you definitely know who lives there. Lord Lee is the justice in our hearts. He doesn't fear the powerful and has redressed the grievances of countless people. This residence was bestowed to him by the Empress." Speaking of Lord Lee, the peddler began to talk endlessly. At a certain moment, he saw 2 figures walking over from the front. He said, "What a coincidence. That's Lord Lee and his wife. Miss, don't you think they're a match made in heaven?" There was no sound from beside him. The peddler turned around and suddenly shivered. There was no one beside him. There was no girl. It was noon, and the sun was warm, but he felt a chill rushing from his tailbone to his brain. He grabbed his load and ran toward the crowded street. In front of the Li residence, Li Mu held Lu Hanyan's hand. Just as he was about to step through the door, he suddenly sensed something and turned to look in a certain direction. There was only a peddler carrying a load there. For some reason he was running for his life. Lu Hanyan saw him stop and also looked back. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "It's nothing. Let's go in." Chapter 353. At that moment, Li Mu inexplicably felt a strong throbbing in his heart. For cultivators who had refined their 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, it was rare for them to have such a feeling. Most of their senses had a reason, but when Li Mu looked over, he did not find anything. The two of them walked into the house and the door of the Li residence closed. In a shallow alley in the north court, in a place that Li Mu could not see, a woman leaned against the wall. Her face under the cloak was extremely pale. The 8th of October. There was only 1 day left until the wedding day. Lu Hanyan returned to the great music lane, which she regarded as her maiden home. Tomorrow, Li Mu would bring her back in a palanquin with 8 carriers. As the wedding day approached, Li Mu became leisurely. He did not invite many people, and there were not many guests coming tomorrow. Fu Daozi was still in seclusion. Yu Zhenzi and Hian Jinko came as representatives of the Fulu school. Although the headmaster and the other peak chiefs did not come, they still sent their gifts. The talismans on Li Mu's body had been almost used up in the battle with the killers of the Devil's Doctrine. He took advantage of this wedding to replenish them. Hanja and junior sister Qin also came with Yu Zhenzi and the others. Hanja looked at Li Mu with regret and said, "Actually, I thought that you and Li..." Before he could finish, he was kicked by Li Si behind him. Zhang Shan covered his mouth from behind and dragged him away. After a while, Hanja came back and said, "No matter what, congratulations to you for marrying such a good woman like Martial Aunt Lu. I wonder where my future Dao companion is now." Junior sister Qin casually walked in front of Hanja, coughed softly and puffed out her small chest. Hanja glanced at junior sister Qin and looked at Chen Miao Miao, who was standing beside Li Si and had lost a lot of weight. He said, "Even Li Si has junior sister Chen. God is really unfair." Chen Miao Miao also came with Li Si this time. She had an earth elemental body. Before her cultivation reached a high level, her body shape would be different from ordinary people. But after cultivation, she was much thinner than before. Of course, even if she had lost half of her weight, Li Si still looked like a little bird standing beside her. Li Mu's eyes inadvertently glanced and saw a figure passing by outside the door. He was surprised and did not know why Zhou Zhong would appear here. Calm. Other than his 2 old friends, Zhang Chun and Li Si, Li Mu did not invite any of the officials of the court. Zhou Zhong belonged to the opposing camp. He could not have come to congratulate Li Mu on his marriage. Li Mu walked out of the gate and saw Zhou Zhong standing beside the carriage, looking at the gate of the Li estate. Li Mu walked over and asked, "Assistant Minister Zhou, is something the matter?" Zhou Zhong looked at the plaque of the Li estate and said indifferently, "Nothing." Li Mu remembered that Zhou Zhong had once said that this was the residence of a friend of his. The original owner of the Li estate seemed to have been a criminal official, but Li Mu did not know what crime he had committed. These 2 days were good days. He could temporarily put aside the matter of the camp. Li Mu said, "Assistant Minister Zhou, do you want to go in and have a cup of tea before you leave?" Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "Today is the death anniversary of my old friend. I am not in the mood for tea." Li Mu's face darkened. The little good impression he had of Zhou Zhong disappeared. Bang! Li Mu walked through the gate, and the gate of the Li estate closed with a loud bang. Even if today was the death anniversary of his old friend, he should not have said it in front of Li Mu, who was about to get married. If he was not the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, being caught and beaten for speaking so rudely before someone's wedding was already a light punishment. If he met someone with a bad temper, he would probably be hung up and beaten. Tomorrow was the day of the wedding. Li Mu did not want to be affected by these matters. He took a deep breath and threw Zhou Zhong to the back of his mind. The 9th day of the 10th month. The festive atmosphere in the divine capital reached its peak on this day. Li Mu had too many labels on him. The top scholar, the empress-favored minister, the divine capital's righteous sky. At noon, when he rode on his horse and married his bride, the streets of the divine capital were empty. There were only a few tables set up for the wedding banquet in the Lee estate. However, on the wide street outside the Lee estate, the crowd was crowded with heads and feet. There was a row of long tables on both sides of the street outside the estate. No matter the identity of the guests, they could drink a cup of wine here. The commoners lined up outside the Lee estate, fighting to be the first to present congratulatory gifts. Some gave half a piece of cloth, while others gave a pair of red candles. Although they were not valuable, it was a token of their sincerity. The entire northern court had never been so lively since the day it was built. Of course, to the high officials and nobles who were used to the tranquility of the northern court, this was noisy. An official sat in his own courtyard. Hearing the noise outside the door, he said unhappily, "So annoying. Isn't it just a wedding? Why do they have to make such a big scene?" His wife stood beside him and said, "They did not make such a big scene. This is the celebration of the commoners. When master can make the commoners like this, I will wake up laughing in my dreams." The official pursed his lips and said unhappily, "What's the point of winning over these unruly commoners? He doesn't have many friends in the imperial court." His wife looked at him and said disdainfully, "Those in the imperial court can be considered friends. They call you friends on the surface, but who knows how they are scheming against you behind your back." In another mansion, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel stood in the courtyard. He was not affected by the noise outside at all. He walked into the study and asked, "Are you sure?" An official in the study said with a gloomy face, "Tianhe County Minister Ho Bai, Ani County Magistrate Ding Yun, Baiyu County Magistrate Deng Zhua, and Zhongshan County Magistrate Huang Ding. Sir, don't you think these names are familiar?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel narrowed his eyes and said, "It is indeed the four of them." The official said, 14 years ago, the four of them were all in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. They were also involved in that incident. 14 years later, they were killed one after another. These cases were not done by the demon sect. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "You mean that someone is avenging that person?" The official said, "There is no other possibility." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel narrowed his eyes and said, 14 years have passed, and they are still so persistent. Who could it be? Did someone from the Lee family escape the net? The official thought for a moment and said, "The entire Lee family was wiped out back then. There can't be anyone who escaped the net." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel scoffed and said, "No matter who it is, just capture them and deal with them. If he can make a move on these four people, he won't let other targets go. He probably doesn't have the guts to do so in Shindu. Check where the officials who were involved in this incident are now." The official said, "I've already checked. There was a minister-counselor back then. He is now in Yantai County as the Yantai County Magistrate. He is at the peak of the fourth realm. From the looks of these cases, the culprit's strength is not higher than the fifth realm. Should we inform the Office of Worship and have them deal with that person outside to avoid unnecessary trouble?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel laughed mockingly and said, "Unnecessary trouble. Haha, if you want to overturn that case, you have to overturn the imperial court first. No one has the ability to do that. Whether it is the new party or the old party, or His Majesty, none of them will let that happen." The official asked, "Then what do you mean?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "Have the people from the Department of Offerings guard Yantai County. According to the law, the culprit should be brought back to Luoyang to be punished for murdering an official of the imperial court. Have them follow the rules and don't do anything unnecessary. Bring him back to Luoyang." "I'd like to see who is so overconfident." The official nodded and said, "Yes." A moment later, he walked out of the residence of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and passed through the bustling crowd outside. When he passed by the Lee Manor, he even looked inside curiously. In the Lee Manor, the wedding ceremony had already begun. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan did not have any relatives. They were only friends in the manor. Mr. Mei was the host of the wedding. He stood in front with a smile on his face. First bow to heaven and earth. Second bow. If there are no parents, then bow to master. Husband and wife bow to each other. Send them to the bridal chamber. Tonight was a joyous night in the Li manor. Both inside and outside the manor were filled with jubilation. In the bridal chamber, Li Mu slowly lifted Lu Hanyan's veil. The two looked at each other and raised their wine cups. As their arms crossed, countless bright fireworks rose into the night sky outside the window, blooming with dazzling colors. In a wine shop in Chengdu, the bright fireworks lit up the night sky, and also illuminated the beautiful face of the woman in the wine shop after she took off her bamboo hat. She picked up the wine jar and finished it in one gulp. Putting on her bamboo hat, she turned and walked out of the wine shop. Looking in the direction of the fireworks, she whispered, "Congratulations, Changel Palace." Zhou Yi leaned lazily on the chair and took a sip of wine. He frowned and said, "What kind of tribute wine is this? It has no taste at all. Don't send it next year." Chapter 354. The past night was destined to be a sleepless night for many people in the divine capital. The famous Lord Li had just gotten married. Who knew how many women in the divine capital were sad? He was the top scholar in both civil and military affairs, the empress' favorite, the messenger of justice and the people's justice. He was also so handsome. For the young women in the divine capital, he was undoubtedly the ideal husband candidate. Especially for such a man. He hadn't even gotten married yet. Some women who thought they were pretty would intentionally or unintentionally linger in front of the Li manor, fantasizing about having a romantic encounter with him, and becoming the mistress of the Li manor in the future. Before Li Mu's wedding, they still had some hope. Now their hopes were dashed. They couldn't feel any jealousy towards that lucky woman. They could only wish them happiness. Li manor. The sun had already risen to the top of their heads. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan walked out of the room. Lu Hanyan's face was rosy. She hid the smile in her eyes. Li Mu, on the other hand, was gloomy and unhappy. Just last night, the two of them finally had their first yin-yang dual cultivation. The process of dual cultivation was undoubtedly very happy, but the result was unacceptable to Li Mu. Last night, their yin and yang merged. Many years of pure yang and pure yin power flowed in their bodies. Lu Hanyan's cultivation successfully broke through to the 5th level. Li Mu's cultivation also experienced a surge, but he was still stuck at the peak of the 4th level. He was still one step away from the 5th level. However, this step was the most difficult step. Some people could take this step in a few days. Some needed half a month. Some took 3 to 5 years. Some took 30 to 50 years. There was no pattern. Li Mu started cultivating before Lu Hanyan. He was also the one who led her onto the path of cultivation. But she broke through to the 5th level before Li Mu. Li Mu was so angry that he trembled. Was he destined to be under a woman for the rest of his life? Damn the heavens. They were both yin and yang dual cultivators. This was too unfair to him. Lu Hanyan held his arm and comforted him. Don't be discouraged. Maybe you'll break through in a few days. In the future, I'll protect you. Although she was comforting Li Mu, there was an unconcealable pride in her tone. Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Do I look like someone who needs a woman's protection?" As he spoke, his voice became softer and softer, because he realized that he really was that kind of person. In terms of safety, they used to rely on Li Qing, then Su He, and then the Empress. In terms of finances, they had always relied on Lu Hanyan. Only when he thought about it carefully did he realize that he had been relying on women all this time. Now that even Lu Hanyan's cultivation was higher than his, Li Mu couldn't help but feel a little sour in his heart. What son of heaven? Maybe he was just a son adopted by the heavens. After the meal, Li Mu decided to enter the palace. Yesterday's wedding went so smoothly. In fact, to a large extent, it was thanks to the Empress. Li Mu didn't have any maids or servants at home, so she asked Mr. Mei to bring some maids from the palace. The dishes at the wedding banquet were prepared by the imperial chef she sent to the palace. The wedding wine prepared for the guests was also the tribute wine she sent from the palace. Although she didn't come herself, she asked Mr. Mei to arrange his wedding very well. Changel Palace. Li Mu walked into the hall. The Empress, who was reading the memorials, didn't even raise her head. She asked. Why did you come to the palace instead of staying at home with the bride? Li Mu handed a few food boxes with dishes he made to Mr. May and said, Your Majesty helped me with my wedding. I'm here to thank you. Zhou looked up at him and said, If you really want to thank me, then help me read these memorials. There are endless memorials every day. It's so annoying. Li Mu found that the Empress was becoming more and more presumptuous after they became familiar with each other. There are endless memorials every day. It's so annoying. Is this something an Empress should say? Even if she was really annoyed, she couldn't say it out loud. Wise emperors were all busy at night. Only a fatuous emperor would be annoyed by the memorials. If this sentence was written down, it would leave a bad name in the future. In the past, she would still pretend and put on airs in front of Li Mu. Now she didn't even want to pretend. Li Mu wanted to help her, but the harem couldn't interfere with politics. How could a minister help the emperor deal with memorials? If this was known, a favored minister would never be able to get rid of the label of messing up the government. Li Mu shook his head and said helplessly, Your Majesty, this isn't very good. Zhou Qiong looked at him disappointedly and said, I understand now. You used to say that you would go through water and tread on fire for me, but it was all fake. You weren't even willing to help me look at the memorials, let alone go through water and tread on fire. Li Mu walked up and said helplessly, I'll see, okay. The Empress completely revealed her true nature in front of him today. She didn't even pretend anymore. She even used Li Mu's words to trick him. If Li Mu refused, it would mean that what he said to the Empress before was all false. Mr. May put the food in the food boxes on the table. Li Mu picked up the pile of memorials and went to the corner. The memorials presented by each ministry were sorted according to their importance. The Empress had already dealt with the most important memorials. The rest were the less important ones. There were 36 counties and hundreds of counties in the Great Zhou. Even though the ministries had solved most of the problems, there were still many things left for the Empress to deal with. Zhou Yi was eating leisurely at the side. She glanced at Li Mu and said, I haven't seen you for a few days. Your cultivation has improved a lot. Li Mu explained, because I have a pure yang body, and my wife has a pure yin body. When pure yang and pure yin mixed together, it would produce an incomparably strange power. It had the effect of increasing mana and breaking through the barrier of cultivation. Li Mu didn't say it explicitly, but anyone could understand what he was implying. He meant that last night, they mixed their yin and yang. Zhou Yi instantly felt that the food in front of her didn't smell so good. Not only that, Li Mu's words made her involuntarily think of the scene of their yin and yang mixing together. She, who had never experienced such a scene, wouldn't have thought of it. But she happened to see Li Mu's dream. The more she wanted to forget, the clearer the scene became. She could erase other people's memories, but she couldn't erase her own. If her memories were lost, her inner demons would still exist. This would cause her even more trouble. Her inner demons could be suppressed with the art of clear mind, but some thoughts couldn't. The courtier that originally belonged to her had become another woman's husband. They lived in the house that she bestowed upon them, and used the things that she bestowed upon them. She couldn't even go there anymore. Zhou Qiong admitted that she was a little envious. After having a wife, Li Mu's thoughts couldn't be wholeheartedly focused on the palace. He hadn't used the spirit snail she gave him for a long time. What made her feel conflicted was that she felt that Mei Wei was right. Although Li Mu was her minister, he should also have his own life. She shouldn't be too demanding of him, and shouldn't be too possessive of him. But why did she still feel so uncomfortable? It was as if her sisters had taken away her beloved doll when she was young. At this moment, the closer she got to Li Mu, the more chaotic her heart became. She put down her chopsticks, stood up, and said, Look first. I'm going out for a walk. The Empress chose to be an empress who didn't do anything. Li Mu could continue to help her deal with the memorials. She didn't know about these memorials until she saw them. She didn't know that being an empress was so difficult. There were already a lot of things to do in the 36 counties of Great Zhou. As the superior country of Zhuzhou, Great Zhou also had to deal with the affairs of other countries in Zhuzhou. In some small countries there was a coup d'état. The orthodox royal family would ask for help from Great Zhou. There were also some small countries that were invaded by demons and demons. They couldn't resist with their own strength, so they would ask for help from Great Zhou. The ministers didn't have the right to make these decisions. In the end, it was up to the Empress to make the decision. Li Mu couldn't make these decisions for the Empress, so he picked out these memorials and put them aside. As for the matters within the Great Zhou dynasty, especially after the various levels of approval, as long as the Empress's written instructions were approved, Li Mu would approve them for her. After he finished dealing with the memorials, the Empress still hadn't returned. Li Mu left Chang'e Palace and went to the Secretariat. In addition to helping the Empress, he also had his own matters to deal with. When Li Mu walked into his office, he found that there were a few more booklets on the table in his office. Among the 6 officials of the Secretariat, he was in charge of the Ministry of Justice. He was the busiest. Li Mu opened a few memorials and found that they were from Yushan County. Yushan County's Baiyu County Magistrate and Zhongshan County Magistrate were suspected to have died in revenge from the demon sect. The Yushan County Magistrate had personally come to the Immortals' capital to report this matter, which was a step faster than the memorials from the county government. The Imperial Court had already sent the Consecration Department to investigate this case. They just had to wait for the results. Li Mu flipped through the 2 memorials and put them aside, preparing to read the next one. He had already picked up a new one, but he seemed to have realized something and put it down again. Li Mu opened the 2 memorials again and put them together. He found that the Baiyu County Magistrate and Zhongshan County Magistrate had both been transferred out of the Ministry of Personnel before they went to work. Moreover, their official positions were in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. There was only a difference of a few months when they were transferred out of the Ministry of Personnel. If he remembered correctly, the Ani County Magistrate and Tianhe County Magistrate who had died seemed to have experience as officials in the Ministry of Personnel. However, Li Mu did not know what official position they had in detail. Within half a year, 4 officials from the Ministry of Personnel had died. This was too much of a coincidence. If the deaths of the first 2 officials and the 2 officials from Yushan County were committed by the same culprit, then this case had nothing to do with the demon sect. The Imperial Court had investigated in the wrong direction, because from the timeline, when the first 2 officials died, Li Mu had not yet provoked the demon sect. After discovering the connection between these cases, Li Mu went directly to the Ministry of Justice. He found the director of the Ministry of Justice and asked, who was investigating the assassination of the 2 officials from Hanyang County and Danyang County. The director of the Ministry of Justice said, it was Manager Wei. Li Mu said, let him come. The director of the Ministry of Justice walked out of the Yamen and quickly found Wei Peng. Li Mu looked at Wei Peng and asked, what position did the Tianhe County Magistrate and Ani County Magistrate hold in the Ministry of Personnel? Wei Peng thought for a moment and said, Manager of the Ministry of Personnel. Li Mu was surprised. Manager of the Ministry of Personnel again. After saying that, he continued to ask, do you know when they were the managers of the Ministry of Personnel? Wei Peng clearly remembered this matter very clearly. He did not think too much and said, about 12 or 13 years ago. The 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel at the same time had all been promoted in half a year. Then 12 or 13 years later, within half a year, they all died of unnatural causes. What this meant was self-evident. Li Mu frowned slightly and muttered, what happened during that time? Chapter 355. Li Mu had originally thought that these cases were the work of the demon sect. However, when he followed the clues to this point, he was shocked to find that things were not as simple as they seemed. 3 counties and 4 counties for cases, all pointed to the Ministry of Personnel. If these 4 cases were all done by the same person, then the severity and viciousness of these cases would be raised by several levels. Li Mu immediately made a decision and said, someone come with me to the Ministry of Personnel. The director of the Ministry of Justice glanced at Wei Peng and said, why aren't you following Lord Li? After analyzing the clues of these cases, Li Mu believed that the final answer lay in the Ministry of Personnel. The Ministry of Personnel was not far from the Ministry of Justice, so they arrived quickly. Wei Prung was already a frequent visitor to the Ministry of Personnel, so he quickly sent for detailed information on the 4 assassinated officials, managers of the Ministry of Personnel at the same time, promoted at the same time, and assassinated at the same time. Li Mu looked at the 4 sets of information and said, "There should be another one. Check who else was promoted at the Ministry of Personnel during that time." After the minor official flipped through the files, he said, "There's one more person, Lord Yu, who was the minister counselor at the time. After the 4 managers were promoted, he was quickly transferred to Yantai County and promoted to Yantai County Lieutenant." Li Mu could already guess that the reason for these people's promotions more than 10 years ago was probably the reason for their deaths more than 10 years later. Obviously, as long as he found out why they were promoted more than 10 years ago, he would be able to find out the identity of the mastermind behind these cases. Li Mu continued to ask, "Do you know the reason for their promotions?" The minor official shook his head and said, "I've only been in the Ministry of Personnel for 3 years, so I don't know what happened more than 10 years ago. If Lord Li wants to know what happened more than 10 years ago, you can ask me directly." Seeing a middle-aged man walk in, the minor official immediately bowed and said, "Lord Assistant Minister." Li Mu looked at the man, his eyes slightly focused, and said calmly, "Assistant Minister Chen." Li Mu and this left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel had quite a bit of enmity between them. The wife of the county magistrate of Yang County, who was killed by Xiao Yu, was this person's sister. At that time, the enmity between him and Li Mu had already been formed. After that, Li Mu came to the divine capital and scolded this person in the imperial court. He didn't leave him any face, and this caused the enmity between them to deepen. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said slowly, "More than 10 years ago, there was an official in the Ministry of Personnel who colluded with the enemy and committed treason. He was exposed by the other officials in the Ministry of Personnel. Later, that official's entire family was executed. The other officials in the Ministry of Personnel were all promoted and placed in important positions. The officials who died were all promoted during that period. It was obvious that they were retaliated against by the remnants of the guilty officials' party. However, the honored masters of the Department of Offerings have already gone to Yantai County. I believe that the culprit will be arrested very soon." He didn't expect the Ministry of Personnel to have already found out about this. Li Mu didn't need to make this trip. He was about to leave when the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel suddenly smiled and said, "Lord Li, you may not know this, but the Li residence you're living in now is the residence of that guilty official. The day before your wedding is the anniversary of the death of that guilty official's family. I wonder if you heard the screams of their ghosts on your wedding night." Before the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel finished speaking, his expression changed abruptly. A beam of golden light flew out of Li Mu's ear and shot toward him. The golden light was initially the size of a grain of rice, but it quickly turned into a giant bell. It crashed into him like a speeding carriage. White light flashed on the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and instantly formed a shield. However, the protective barrier was like a piece of paper when it was struck by the enormous bell. It was directly shattered. The giant bell didn't slow down and crashed into the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. He crashed heavily into the wall of the Ministry of Personnel and spat out another mouthful of blood. He fell to the ground and pointed at Li Mu. He said furiously, You dare." The law bell floated above Li Mu's shoulder. Li Mu walked to the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and said calmly, "Watch your mouth. If there's a next time, it won't just be a few broken ribs." He took one last look at the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and turned to leave. Seeing this, the other officials of the Ministry of Personnel all returned to their duty rooms. They didn't dare to watch. Although beating up an official of the imperial court was punishable, the assistant minister had brought this upon himself. Anyone who had just gotten married wouldn't be in a good mood after hearing his words. If it were someone else, they might be in trouble. However, Lord Li was His Majesty's favorite official. If the assistant minister dared to make a big deal out of this, he would be the one to suffer in the end. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel got up from the ground and fixed his ribs with a solemn expression. He patted the dust off his body and walked out of the Ministry of Personnel. He was just trying to show off. He didn't expect that Li Mu would dare to beat him up in the Ministry of Personnel. Under the Empress' favor, this person was lawless. However, he could only endure today's humiliation for the time being. With how much the Empress doted on Li Mu, it wouldn't do him any good if this matter reached the imperial court. He walked out of the Ministry of Personnel and quickly arrived at the Ministry of Justice. In the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong looked at his sorry state and asked, "Lord Chun, what happened?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel didn't speak. Instead, he asked, "Are you sure no one from the Li family escaped?" Zhou Zhong glanced at him and said, "You should know better than me." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "I just remembered that he has a daughter. She wasn't in the divine capital at the time, and couldn't be found. The 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel then all died in the past half a year. I'm afraid she's the one behind this." Zhou Zhong asked, "Are you afraid that she'll come after you for revenge?" "Aren't you afraid? Don't forget that you stood on our side in the end." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel glanced at him and said, "However, she won't have the chance to come after us. The people from the Department of Worship have already set up an ambush in Yantai County. They should be able to capture her and bring her back to the divine capital soon. When that time comes, don't let her have the chance to say anything. Although this won't cause us much trouble, the higher-ups still don't want to hear any rumors." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "Don't worry, I know." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel looked at him and said, "I'm worried that you'll remember our old friendship. Lord Zhou, you're a smart man. I believe that you'll make the right choice. You should know that we weren't the only ones who wanted him dead back then. Those who make everyone their enemy won't have a good ending." Zhou Zhong leaned back in his chair and said, "That's not necessarily the case." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel seemed to have thought of something. His chest where the giant bell hit him started to hurt again. His face immediately darkened and he said, "If it wasn't for the Empress' protection, he would have died 1,000 times over. Just wait and see. No matter who wins in the end, between us and the Zhou family, he'll be the first to die. After he dies, the divine capital will remain the same as it was before." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel gloomily said a few more words and left the Ministry of Justice. The door to the assistant minister's office closed. Zhou Zhong slowly stood up from his chair. He clenched and unclenched his fists. His expression was conflicted and pained. He seemed to be making a difficult choice in his heart. When his gaze swept across the law of the great Zhou on the table, he stared at the 3 words for a long time before finally sitting down slowly. "I'm sorry." He closed his eyes and muttered softly. Then he curled up his body in the chair. Li Mu left the Ministry of Personnel and returned home. He vented all his anger from Zhou Zhong on the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Sure enough, he felt much better. Lu Hanyan had already finished cooking. She asked, "Why did you come back so late today?" Li Mu explained, "I helped the Empress approve some memorials. Then I went to the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Personnel. I was delayed for a while." Lu Hanyan asked in surprise, "Why did you help the Empress approve memorials? That's going against the rules. Won't you be impeached?" Although Li Mu also approved some memorials, the ones that were sent to the Empress were all important matters. Not even the Prime Minister had the right to approve them, let alone a minister from the Secretariat. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. If she doesn't say anything, and I don't say anything, no one will know." Lu Hanyan was still confused. She asked, "Why didn't Her Majesty approve them herself?" Li Mu said, "You don't know Her Majesty. She's actually very lazy when it comes to politics. You'll know when you get to know her in the future. But she hasn't been coming to our house recently. Maybe she's afraid of being upset." Lu Hanyan asked, "Upset by what?" Li Mu explained, "Seeing us being so lovey-dovey, and thinking about how she's all alone, she's upset." "Aha!" Mr. May stood at the door of the Li Manor with a box of food in his hand. He snorted loudly. Li Mu's expression changed instantly. He smiled and said, "Sister May, you're just in time. Do you want to sit down and eat together?" Mr. May was here to deliver the box of food. He handed it to Li Mu and glared at him. No need. I still have things to do in the palace. She was about to leave when Li Mu remembered something. He ran out of the door and said, Sister May, wait. Mr. May turned around and asked, What's the matter? Li Mu asked, Sister May, do you know who the previous owner of the Li Manor is? Mr. May was surprised. Why are you suddenly asking this? Li Mu said, I'm just curious. Mr. May looked around and nodded. I know. It's the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi. Li Mu said, I heard from the Ministry of Justice that he betrayed the country and his family was exterminated by the imperial court. Mr. May thought for a while and said, Lord Li is a really good official. He pushed for the reform of the law and proposed to abolish the Silver Act. He tried his best to stop the previous emperor from granting the death exemption. He did a lot of good things for the people. She suddenly looked at Li Mu and said, Actually, you're very similar to Lord Li. You're in a high position, but what you do is for the people. Li Mu said in surprise. How could such a person betray the country? Mr. May shook his head and didn't explain further. Li Mu understood what she meant. What Li Mu and he did affected the interests of the privileged class in Luoyang. Their enemy wasn't one party in the imperial court, but all the parties combined. Without a reliable backer, this kind of reformer usually didn't have a good ending. He was lucky to have met the Empress. Otherwise, his ending wouldn't be much better than Lord Li's. Li Mu had the Empress, but Lord Li didn't. Li Mu asked, Did the previous emperor just watch this kind of loyal official be persecuted? Mr. May shook his head. He tried his best to stop the previous emperor from granting the death exemption. The previous emperor was also very dissatisfied with him. The previous emperor tacitly agreed to those people persecuting him. When Li Mu heard this, he was furious and cursed, This bastard. Mr. May knocked on his head and said, Mind your status. Is this something you can say? After that, she touched Li Mu's head and said, Let's not talk about that bastard. I forgot to tell you that starting tomorrow, you don't have to bring food to Her Majesty anymore. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said, I can finally sleep more in the future, Mr. May said. You can cook in the imperial kitchen from now on. Li Mu was shocked. What? Mr. May glanced at him and asked, What? You don't want to? Did you forget what you said to Her Majesty before? You're willing to go through fire and water for her. Now you don't want to cook a few dishes for her? Were you lying to Her Majesty before? Li Mu looked at Mr. May blankly. Mr. May stared at him and asked, Why are you looking at me? Li Mu murmured, Why do you speak so much like Her Majesty? As a friend, I have to remind you that Her Majesty is different from you. At your age, you should be down to earth, considerate, and sensible. If you still play the little girl game, you might not be able to get married in this lifetime. Mr. May asked, What's different about Her Majesty? Li Mu looked around and whispered, You still have a chance to get married, but Her Majesty doesn't. Even if she wants to marry, no one dares to marry her. It's more likely that she marries someone else. For Mr. May, Li Mu felt like a younger brother who had a family and saw that no one wanted his older sister. She wasn't in a hurry, and Li Mu was worried for her too. He had to let her know her place. Her age was comparable to two 18-year-old girls. If she couldn't recognize herself, she might still be alone when she was 80 for this reason. Li Mu even criticized the Empress behind her back again. However, he trusted Mr. May a lot. At most, she would give Li Mu a slap on the head, but she wouldn't complain to the Empress. Li Mu's trust in Mr. May completely collapsed when he slept next to Lu Hanyan at night, and saw the Empress waiting for him with a whip in her dream. Chapter 356. In front of the Secretariat. Li Mu looked at Mr. May with resentful eyes, recalling the beating in his dream last night, and said, You betrayed my trust. Mr. May's lips moved as if he wanted to explain, but she couldn't tell Li Mu that Her Majesty had disguised herself as her and visited the Li mansion incognito. She coughed softly and said, I didn't tell Her Majesty, but in Shindu you can't hide it from her if you criticize Her Majesty behind her back. As Li Mu's cultivation improved and his knowledge widened, the mysterious veil of the masters of the upper realm had long been removed in his eyes. The Empress's cultivation was high, but it wasn't so high that she could know everything in the world just by sitting in the Changel Palace. She could even hear Li Mu complaining about her. Now he began to wonder if the Empress had installed some kind of eavesdropping magic weapon on him. Or maybe when he was persuading Mr. May yesterday, she used the dark light technique to spy on him, but he had a jade talisman that could shield the secrets of heaven, so the dark light technique couldn't spy on him. Could it be that the Empress blocked others and only gave herself permission? Just in case, Li Mu put the jade talisman that he carried with him into the teapot space. Most of the time he didn't care if the Empress spied on him, but today was different from the past. He still had some inconveniences every day. As for the thing that could shield the secrets of heaven, he could use Fulu instead. The secrets of heaven were hard to predict, but shielding them was easy. He had the lifetime experience of Talisman Daozi and the inheritance of the Taoist page, so it wasn't difficult to draw a Fulu to replace the shielding jade talisman. After parting with Mr. May, Li Mu walked into the secretariat. These days, Li Mu had dealt with all the memorials that he needed to deal with in time. Today he was only busy for more than 15 minutes and had nothing to do. Since he had nothing to do, he picked up a pen and wrote a name on a paper. Li Yi. This official with the same surname as him used to be a clear stream in the imperial court, but his ending was extremely regrettable. More than 10 years ago, for the sake of the people of Great Zhou, he made an enemy of the nobles of the imperial court. More than 10 years later, Li Mu was living in his old house, doing things that he had never finished. It seemed that fate existed in the unseen world. The 4 dead managers of the Ministry of Personnel were probably one of the people who had framed him back then. The real culprit behind their deaths was very likely a friend of Lord Li's. Li Mu felt a little regretful. Revenge was indeed satisfying, but the majesty of the law was not to be challenged. The 4 of them had broken the law and should be tried by the imperial court. He had killed many officials of the imperial court for personal gain. The circumstances were extremely bad. No matter what the reason was, he would not be able to escape death. At this point, Li Mu could not save him, but he wanted to do something for him, for the hero who had died in vain. Not for anything else, but for the fate of a house. He left the secretariat and returned to the Ministry of Justice. As soon as the director of the Ministry of Justice saw him, he came out of the yamen and asked, "Does Official Li have any orders?" Li Mu said, "I want to investigate a case." The director of the Ministry of Justice said, "Which case does Official Li want to investigate? I will send someone to find it for you." Li Mu said, 14 years ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi, committed treason. The director of the Ministry of Justice trembled when he heard this, and his face immediately turned pale. Li Mu saw the change in his expression and asked, "Why, is there a problem?" The director of the Ministry of Justice pulled Li Mu into his yamen, and only then did he dare to take a breath and persuade Li Mu. "Officially, this time you must listen to my advice. This case cannot be touched, really cannot be touched." Li Mu asked, "Why not?" The director of the Ministry of Justice shook his head and said, "This case involves too many people. Moreover, it has been decided for more than 10 years. Officially, why do you want to cause more trouble?" Li Mu looked at the director of the Ministry of Justice. When he wanted to investigate the academy, he thought that the director of the Ministry of Justice had not been so afraid. It seemed that this case was indeed unusual. Li Mu said, "You just need to bring the file over." The director of the Ministry of Justice still looked hesitant. This. Zhou Zhong walked in and said, "Since Official Li wants it, then give it to him." The director of the Ministry of Justice looked at Zhou Zhong and finally nodded, saying, "Yes." Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and asked, "This case has been over for more than 10 years. Why do you suddenly want to investigate it?" Li Mu looked directly at Zhou Zhong and asked in return, "Why don't you investigate it?" The former owner of the Li mansion was Zhou Zhong's friend. He had more reason than Li Mu to commit a crime for his friend. Zhou Zhong did not answer directly. His eyes stopped on Li Mu and said, "You are really very similar. Even the houses you live in are the same." I don't know if this is a sign from the heavens. Li Mu said. You haven't answered my question. Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and said, don't bring up this case again. I'm doing this for your own good. You've done what many of us can't. Don't let the results of your previous efforts go down the drain. Li Mu shook his head and said, next time if you dare to speak rudely in front of the Li mansion, don't blame me for being ruthless. Considering that the former owner of the Li mansion was Zhou Zhong's old friend, Li Mu could forgive him for remembering his old friend on the day before Li Mu's wedding. After today, this reason would no longer exist. The director of the Ministry of Justice had already brought over a thick dossier. After Li Mu opened it, he skipped over the series of evidence at the front. In a battle in the imperial court, if one wanted to pin a crime on a person, it didn't depend on what he did but where he stood. If you stood on the right side, then what was wrong was also right. If you stood on the wrong side, then what was right was also wrong. He directly flipped to the testimony section and saw a series of names. The Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel Xiao Yuan, the Director of the Ministry of Personnel Chen Jian, the Director of the Ministry of Personnel Gao Hong, the Vice Chancellor of the Supreme Court Zhou Chuan, the Marquis of Zhongyong Lu Kuren, the Count of Ping and Yao Bin. 14 years ago, it was these people who convicted Li Yi of treason, causing his family to be exterminated. These were the official positions of these people 14 years ago. Li Mu was familiar with most of these names. The Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel Xiao Yuan was now the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. He was a member of the Xiao royal family. The Director of the Ministry of Personnel Chen Jian was now the Left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The Director of the Ministry of Personnel Gao Hong was now the Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The Vice-Chancellor of the Supreme Court Zhou Chuan was the younger brother of Minister Zhou Jing, the Empress's third uncle, and the current Minister of Works. Most of these people after their names were the nobles of Luoyang. They were also the people whose fundamental interests had been affected by Li Yi's reform. 14 years later, most of them had become important figures in the imperial court. Among them, there were nobles, pillars of the new party, and members of the old party. Li Mu finally knew why the director of the Ministry of Justice had stopped him. Previously, he had only been messing around with the younger generation of these forces. This time, if he wanted to reverse the verdict for Li Yi, he would have to face the elders of these people. 14 years had passed, and they had already occupied important positions in the imperial court. It was not easy to touch even one of them, let alone all of them. It was tantamount to uprooting both the new party and the old party from the imperial court. Not to mention whether anyone could do it. Even if they could, the imperial court of the Great Zhou would be riddled with holes. It would be a perfect opportunity for foreign enemies to take advantage of. Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and asked, do you still want to investigate? Li Mu was no longer the hothead he was when he first entered Luoyang. This was also not a small fight between him and the hedonistic son of a wealthy family. To clear Li Yi's name, it meant that he had to completely clean up the Ministry of Personnel. One minister, two assistant ministers, Zhou Chuan of the Zhou family, and the Empress's third uncle as the mastermind of this case, it was inevitable that they would be sentenced to death. As for the large number of officials involved, although their crimes did not warrant death, many of them would be stripped of their positions and banished from the army. The current Great Zhou court could not accept such turmoil. Zhou Zhong's gaze was still fixed on Li Mu. He said slowly, go back. If you still want to do something for the people in the future, you have to know how to protect yourself. Only by protecting yourself will there be hope. Walking out of the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu's mood was unprecedentedly low. There were some things that even if he knew what was right, he could not ignore the consequences. He had to think for the Empress, and also for the Great Zhou. Thinking carefully about what Zhou Zhong said before he left, Li Mu seemed to understand why Zhou Zhong's name was on the list he saw just now. Protecting himself and leaving behind hope was probably the choice he made at that time. At the same time, Li Mu also knew why the culprit of these 4 cases would choose to take revenge in such a way. Although the law could give him justice, the imperial court could not. Therefore, he chose to seek justice for himself. Most of the time, Li Mu hoped that anyone who broke the law would be punished. Only this time he hoped that the culprit could escape. It would be best if after the deaths of the 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel, he had already given up on revenge and did not go to Yantai County anymore. Yantai County. The Yantai County commandant stood in the courtyard and looked at the figure that appeared in the courtyard. He said mockingly, "I didn't expect you to really dare to come." As soon as he finished speaking, 4 powerful auras appeared in the 4 corners of the courtyard. They enveloped the entire courtyard with a formation, and no one could enter or leave. The Yantai County commandant looked at the woman wearing the bamboo hat and sneered. "You are only at the 4th realm. Who gave you the confidence to assassinate me?" Under the bamboo hat, the woman's lips moved slightly, and she seemed to say a word. A dark purple thunderbolt ignored the isolation of the formation and condensed directly above the Yantai County commandant's head. The Yantai County commandant did not even have time to react before he was reduced to ashes by the thunderbolt. A few of the Imperial Court's consecrators stood dumbfounded on the spot. This person actually killed the Yantai County commandant right in front of them. The Yantai County commandant's cultivation was at the peak of the 4th realm, much higher than that woman. However, she was only at the 4th realm. How could she know the purple heavenly thunder that could only be used at the 5th realm? Moreover, the power of the purple heavenly thunder was close to that of the mid-5th realm. After the woman killed the Yantai County commandant, she took off her bamboo hat and stood quietly on the spot, as if she did not intend to resist. One of the consecrators frowned. She wants to die? They had set up an ambush here, but she still killed the Yantai County commandant right in front of them. Another consecrator flew into a rage out of humiliation. He formed a hand seal and gritted his teeth. "If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." "Stop." A consecrator beside him stopped him and said, "Our duty is only to capture her. Don't do anything unnecessary. Bring her back to the divine capital, and the Imperial Court will deal with her." The woman looked at them and said, "I won't go back to the divine capital with you. Kill me now." One of the consecrators looked at her coldly and said, "That's not up to you. With the crimes you've committed, it would be too easy for you to die just like that." Clang! A shiny sword appeared in the woman's hand, and she stabbed it at the consecrator. The consecrator easily caught the sword with 2 fingers and sneered. "You want to anger me and make me kill you? Dream on. I don't want to kill you now. You don't want to go to the divine capital, so I'll bring you back to the divine capital." As soon as he finished speaking, the other consecrators spoke as well. "If she dies, we won't be able to report back. Let's attack together. Seal her spiritual power first. Don't give her a chance to kill herself." The divine capital. A day ago, Li Mu asked for half a month's leave from the Empress. Firstly, he wanted to spend time with Lu Hanyan. Secondly, he wanted to adjust his mood. Regarding Li Yi's matter, Li Mu wanted to but was powerless to do so. This made him feel very apologetic. The house that he used to live in was not so comfortable these days. In order to make him feel better, he spread some news about the case. The citizens of the divine capital were initially filled with righteous indignation about the deaths of the 4 court officials. This was a provocation to the Imperial Court and trampling on the dignity of the Great Zhou's law. However, after learning the truth, the public opinion changed overnight. So he's avenging Lord Li. Lord Li is such a good person. Those people deserve to die. I hope he doesn't get caught. He might be Lord Li's only descendant. It was also at this time that Li Mu realized that the citizens of the divine capital had never forgotten about Li Yi. Even though more than a decade had passed, some of the older citizens still remembered his deeds when he was mentioned. The younger ones were still young and did not know about Li Yi. However, after hearing the stories of the elders, the flames of justice were ignited in their hearts. Lord Li was persecuted by those people back then for the sake of the citizens. Sigh, it's a pity that Lord Li was not born in the Imperial Court. If only he could join forces with Lord Li Jr., how good would that be? What a pity. Walking hand in hand with Lu Hanyan on the streets, Li Mu could occasionally hear the citizens discussing the events of the past. He finally felt a little better, even though he had already been called Lord Li Jr. by the citizens. Lu Hanyan held Li Mu's hand and said with some regret, I remember that Lord Lee's incident happened exactly a year after I was sold to the music workshop. Lord Lee's entire family was wrongly murdered. The workshop owner was so angry that he didn't open the shop for 3 days and didn't allow us to play. There was a younger sister who, because she didn't need to practice the zither, laughed happily, and was punished by the workshop owner to stand for an entire day. It was also at that time that I heard about Lord Lee from the workshop owner. Who would have thought that the house we're living in now was the house he used to live in? Li Mu sighed and said, "The day before our wedding was the anniversary of his death." Lu Hanyan said with some regret, "If we had known, we would have pushed it back a few days." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "When the time is right, I want to reverse the verdict for him." Lu Hanyan tightly gripped his hand and said, "No matter what decision you make, I'll be with you." With her at his side, Li Mu's mood improved greatly. He accompanied her to visit a few more shops. Just as the two of them were preparing to return home, there was a sudden commotion on the streets. Many citizens rushed forward. Li Mu walked onto the street and stopped a person. "What's going on?" he asked. That person saw that it was Li Mu and sighed. "It's Lord Li. I heard that a few days ago, the murderer of those officials was caught." "Ah, how did she get caught?" "Those who should be caught aren't caught, but those who shouldn't be caught are randomly caught. The people he killed were all people who deserved to die. The imperial court didn't distinguish between right and wrong." The common people's thoughts were often very simple. They did not understand the law, and most of them would only judge a matter based on the morals in their hearts. Their thoughts were often not in line with the law, but they were in line with the most simple understanding of things as an ordinary person. Lu Hanyan walked out and held Li Mu's hand. "Can you think of a way to save him?" she asked. Li Mu shook his head and said, "It's very difficult. Xiao Yu killed the county magistrate of Yang County, because the county magistrate of Yang County killed her. Moreover, she was recognized by the heavens. Even so, the imperial court dared to go against the heavens at the beginning. If the empress hadn't intervened, she wouldn't have been able to escape the fate of having her soul scattered. This case was fundamentally different from Xiao Yu's case. The law didn't encourage revenge. Even the victims could only fight back when their lives were threatened. Revenge after the fact would still be punished by the law. Moreover, he killed 4 officials. The circumstances were extremely bad. There was almost no possibility of being forgiven. A few citizens walked over from afar and spoke with regret. "Ah, she was still caught. I heard that she's Sir Lee's daughter. No wonder she wanted to take revenge for Sir Lee. Could it be that Sir Lee's last bloodline is going to be cut off?" A prisoner's carriage slowly drove over from the front of the street. Parading through the streets was an additional punishment given by the imperial court to those who committed the most heinous crimes. This was a humiliation to them, and also a deterrent to those who had bad intentions. Usually, when criminals were paraded through the streets, the citizens would rush up and throw rotten eggs, rotten vegetables, and other things at them. This was also tacitly allowed by the imperial court. However, today, the streets were exceptionally quiet wherever the prisoner's carriage passed. The citizens silently stood on both sides of the street. They didn't say a word as they watched the prisoner's carriage pass. When they looked at the figure on the prisoner's carriage, there was no disgust or hatred in their eyes. There was only pity and anger towards the imperial court. A citizen who didn't know what was going on saw the prisoner's carriage pass by. He quickly ran home and took out a rotten egg that he always kept at home. Just as he was about to throw it, he was seen by a sharp-eyed man. He kicked him to the ground and asked with red eyes, "What the F***ck are you doing?" The person who was pressed to the ground had a puzzled expression. "I'm going to throw a rotten egg." "Why aren't you prepared at all?" The man said angrily. "That's Sir Lee's child. I told you to throw it. I told you to throw it. If you don't eat this egg today, I'll beat you to death." Just as the person was about to resist, the rotten egg in his hand was snatched and stuffed into his mouth. Ugh! An unbearable stench filled his mouth and nose. His eyes rolled back, and he directly fainted. The prisoner's carriage slowly drove down the street. Beside the prisoner's carriage, 2 priests from the Department of Priests looked at each other and felt a chill in their hearts. Strange, it was too strange. Usually, when the prisoner's carriage passed by, the streets would be in chaos. What was going on today? Why was it so quiet? The two Fifth Realm powerhouses actually couldn't stand the way the commoners looked at them. Li Mu looked at the prisoner's carriage slowly driving down. He originally couldn't bear to look at it, but when his gaze swept over the figure in the prisoner's carriage, everything that he looked at, whether it was the prisoner's carriage, the streets, the shops beside the streets, or the citizens on the streets, everything disappeared. There was only that figure left in his eyes. Looking at the extremely pale and frail figure standing in the prisoner's carriage, Li Mu felt as if someone had grabbed his heart, making it hard for him to breathe. How could it be? How could it be? At this moment, countless thoughts intertwined in his mind. One mystery after another was solved just like that. Li Qing. Li Qing was Li Yi's daughter. Why did she cultivate so hard? Why did she leave Fulu school? Why did she look hesitant and conflicted when she parted ways with Li Mu? Why did she hesitate to speak? These were things that Li Mu couldn't figure out in the past. At this moment he had an answer. In the prisoner's carriage, Li Qing, whose eyes were originally closed, suddenly felt something. She slowly opened her eyes and looked in a direction. The moment their gazes met, her body trembled. A hint of panic flashed across her face. She turned her face away as much as she could to prevent Li Mu from seeing her. Lu Hanyan looked at the figure in the prisoner's carriage in shock. She instinctively let go of Li Mu's hand. In the next moment, Li Mu grabbed her hand again. She turned to look at Li Mu. Her heart instantly calmed down. She gripped Li Mu's hand tightly, and then slowly let go. She looked at Li Mu and said softly, "Go." Li Mu nodded. He looked at her and said, "Wait for me at home." After the prisoner's carriage entered the divine capital, it passed through a few streets and slowly drove to the entrance of the Ministry of Justice. The culprit who had assassinated 5 officials of the imperial court would be temporarily detained in the Ministry of Justice to await trial by the imperial court. Based on her vile actions, she would be sentenced to death if nothing went wrong. A moment later, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong walked into the prison and said to a few people, "You guys go out first." All the prison guards had temporarily left. Zhou Zhong was the only one in front of the prison cell in the deepest part of the Ministry of Justice. Zhou Zhong stood at the door of the prison cell and looked at the woman in the cell. His tone was extremely complicated. He said slowly, "Why didn't you listen to me? Do you know that this is a capital offense? Even I can't save you." Li Qing looked at him and asked, "If I listened to you, would I be able to clear my father's name? Would I be able to avenge my father, mother, and the entire Li family?" Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "You don't understand your father. He doesn't want you to avenge him. He only wants you to live well. I promised him that I would protect his bloodline. I also promised him that I would complete his unfinished business. He views this matter as more important than his life." He was silent for a long time. With his back facing Li Qing, he leaned weakly against the bars of the prison cell and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry." A smile appeared on Li Qing's face as she said, "You didn't let anyone down. You have done enough for me." Zhou Zhong's lips moved. Just as he was about to speak, a furious voice suddenly came from outside the prison. "Zhou, what are you doing in there alone? Come out. I'll count to 3. If you don't come out, I'll smash the door. 1. Lord Li, calm down, calm down." Chapter 357. Li Mu counted 1, and the law bell grew louder as if it was about to strike. The door of the prison opened from the inside and Zhou Zhong walked out. He said in a low voice, "What do you want?" Li Mu said coldly, "You sent all the jailers away and stayed in there alone. I want to ask you, what do you want?" Zhou Zhong regained his composure and said lightly, "I am the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. Can't I ask about the case? Why do I have to send everyone away if I want to ask about the case? This is an important case. All unrelated people should leave. Is there a problem?" "You." Li Mu pointed at Zhou Zhong. He seemed to have thought of something and a light flashed in his mind. He said with a look of understanding, "It's you." Zhou Zhong asked calmly, "What do you mean, Lord Li?" Li Mu looked at him and asked, "You are Li Er, right?" Zhou Zhong's eyes flashed with a trace of shock. He said calmly, "I don't know what Lord Li is talking about." Li Mu didn't know who Li Er was before. After knowing that Li Qing was Li Yi's daughter, he didn't need to guess who Li Er was. Zhou Zhong was Li Er. Zhou Zhong was the one who won the Talisman Dao trial and sent Li Qing to the Fulu school. No wonder Li Mu had never seen the heaven-grade Fulu on his desk. Zhou Zhong himself was a rare Talisman Dao genius, but he never showed it. In this case, the Ministry of Justice didn't investigate the deaths of the Anyang County Magistrate and the Tianhe County Deputy, because Zhou Zhong didn't forget about them. At that time, he knew that these two cases were done by Li Qing and deliberately suppressed them. The mysteries in Li Mu's heart were solved one by one. However, Zhou Zhong's heart was filled with confusion. Why did Li Mu come here? How did he know about his other identity? What was the relationship between him and Li Qing? Li Mu was so anxious that he didn't want to waste time talking nonsense with Zhou Zhong. He said, "Let me in." Zhou Zhong was still puzzled. He stood in front of Li Mu and shook his head. "She is a wanted criminal of the imperial court," he said. "Visiting the prison is forbidden." Li Mu's face darkened as he said, "Get out of the way, or I won't be polite." Zhou Zhong's expression was calm as he asked, "How impolite are you, Lord Li?" Li Mu looked at Zhou Zhong and said, "You forced me to do this." He took out the spirit conch and sent a voice transmission. "Your Majesty." A moment later, Li Mu handed the spirit snail to Zhou Zhong. After Zhou Zhong took it, he heard the voice coming from the spirit conch. He said respectfully to the spirit conch, "Yes, I understand. I will do as you command." He returned the spirit snail to Li Mu and quietly stepped aside. Li Mu walked into the prison. Zhou Zhong was about to follow him in when Li Mu turned around and said, "Close the door. Don't let anyone in, including you." Zhou Zhong frowned and was about to speak when Li Mu took out the spirit conch again and asked, "Do you want His Majesty to talk to you directly?" Zhou Zhong didn't speak again. He closed the door and slowly walked to the assistant minister's office. He looked up and saw the door of the assistant minister's office was closed. Inside the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong extended his hand and flicked out a ray of white light. An image appeared in the air. It was the scene in the prison of the Ministry of Justice. However, as soon as the image appeared, it blurred and nothing could be seen. The heavenly mystery has been blocked. Zhou Zhong's face showed a hint of impatience. He anxiously paced around the office. At the same time, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu had already walked to the deepest part of the prison. The aura he was so familiar with was in the cell around the corner. Li Mu was only one step away from her. It had been a very, very long time since he had been so close to her. Li Mu stood around the corner for a while before slowly taking that step. In the cell, Li Qing bent her knees and leaned against the wall. She raised her head and looked at the door of the cell. A faint smile appeared on her lips and she said, "I thought I wouldn't have the chance to personally congratulate you." Li Mu looked at her and asked, "You already know?" Li Qing hugged her knees and said, "The fireworks that night were very beautiful." Li Mu thought of the inexplicable throbbing in his heart that day. He said, "Sorry, I didn't know the Li estate was your previous home." If he knew the Li estate was her previous home, and that the day before their wedding was the anniversary of her family's death, Li Mu would have asked the Empress for a new estate and chosen a new date to hold the wedding. He simply couldn't imagine how Li Qing felt that night. Li Qing shook her head and said, "It doesn't matter. I heard from the people of Luoyang that you did a lot of good things for the people. I'm very happy that you can live in the Li estate. If father knew, he would be happy to." Li Mu took out a piece of fulu and walked through the cell door. He sat down next to Li Qing. Li Qing tilted her head and looked at him. "Promise me one thing." Li Mu said decisively. "No." Li Qing said, "I'm your boss." Li Mu said, "You used to be. Don't meddle in my business." "I'm not meddling in your business. I'm just doing what I should do. Sir Li is devoted to the people. I admire him, respect him, and see him as my role model. What's wrong with me trying to redress the injustice for my role model?" Li Mu looked at her pale face and said, "Open your mouth." Li Qing turned her head and said, "Leave. Don't come back." Li Mu pinched her chin and put a pill into her mouth. Her mana was sealed. Li Mu couldn't undo the seal for the time being. He could only use the pill bestowed by the Empress to heal her. Li Qing's lips moved. Li Mu said first, "You know me. Once I've decided on something, no one can change it. Even if the Heavenly Emperor came, I would still meddle in this matter." Li Qing turned her head. There was a trace of sobbing in her voice. "Who am I to you? What right do you have to meddle in my affairs? You are my boss." Li Mu looked at her and said, "Before it was you who protected me. Now, it is my turn to protect you." Li Qing grabbed Li Mu's hand tightly. "You can't win against them. Father can't win against them. You can't win against them either. Plus, I can't turn back anymore." Li Mu held her hand and said, "Trust me. I will think of a way to get you out first." Li Qing shook her head and said, "You have already made many enemies in the divine capital. This will become evidence and evidence for them to attack you." Li Mu said, "I will have the Fulu school step in." Li Qing said sadly, "I am no longer a disciple of the Fulu school." Li Mu extended his hand. There was a flash of white light in his palm. A talisman appeared in his hand. He placed the talisman in Li Qing's hand and said, "Now you are again." Li Qing held the talisman and looked at him. Li Mu smiled and said, "I won it in passing when I participated in the Talisman Dao trial. I thought you would need it in the future. I just didn't expect it to be so soon. Surely it's time." Zhou Zhong's voice came from outside. Li Mu stood up and took a deep breath. He looked at Li Qing and said, "Recover well. Don't worry about anything else. I will take care of everything." He walked out of the cell and looked deeply at Li Qing. Then he strode out of the prison. Zhou Zhong stood outside the prison. He looked at Li Mu and asked, "You know her?" Li Mu did not answer. He said, "What do you plan to do?" Zhou Zhong was silent for a moment and said, "Assassinate 5 court officials. According to the law." "Don't King talk to me about the law. Is there any law in the divine capital?" Li Mu had nowhere to vent his anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "If the nobles break the law, they will pay with their gold medallions. If the officials die unjustly, they will have no way to redress their grievances. Tell me, what is the law? What is King law?" Zhou Zhong said in a low voice, "Don't forget that you are an official of the Great Zhou. Don't break the law. Don't forget how many people are waiting for you to make a mistake. If you take a wrong step, you will lose everything you have." Li Mu looked at him and said calmly, "I don't care." Zhou Zhong met his gaze and asked, "What do you care?" Li Mu did not answer. A figure strode in from the entrance of the Ministry of Justice. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel had just stepped into the Ministry of Justice when he asked Zhou Zhong, "Sir Zhou, where is the Li family's remaining member?" When he reached the courtyard of the Ministry of Justice, he realized that the atmosphere was not right. He stopped in his tracks. He looked to the side of Zhou Zhong and met a pair of blood-red eyes. Li Mu looked at the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, one of the masterminds who framed Li Qing's father. He finally found an outlet to vent his anger. With a thought, a Fulu appeared out of thin air. A faint light flashed on the Fulu, and the runes merged into Li Mu's body. A layer of golden armor appeared on his body. Even his fists were covered in golden light. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel realized that something was wrong. His expression changed as he shouted, "Li Mu, what are you doing?" Li Mu's entire body was covered in armor. He gritted his teeth and said, "Chen, I've tolerated you for a long time." As soon as he finished speaking, his body turned into a blur as he flew toward the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel hurriedly blocked and said in anger, "Li Mu, are you crazy?" "I am crazy, but it's all your fault. The humiliation you gave me that day caused me to develop an inner demon. What enmity do you have with me? How dare you frame me like this? I can't take this lying down. Today, I'll pay you back double for the humiliation you gave me that day." The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was shocked. He did not expect that his mocking words that day would cause Li Mu to develop an inner demon. This made him angry, but also pleased. It would be best if the inner demon took over his mind and turned him into a lunatic. His Majesty would not dote on a lunatic. The only outcome of having one's mind taken over by the inner demon was death. However, this trace of happiness in his heart quickly disappeared without a trace. He did not know what Fulu Limu had used, but the combat power he displayed was not weaker than a creation realm cultivator. In close combat, the left assistant minister could only passively defend. He did not even have the chance to use any spells. After taking a few punches, he looked at Zhou Zhong and shouted, "Lord Zhou, what are you waiting for?" Zhou Zhong shouted back, "Lord Qin, I'm coming to help you now." With that, he flew up but was kicked away by Li Mu. His body flew into a yamen and did not appear again. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel knew that Zhou Zhong was no match for Li Mu, so he fled out of the Ministry of Justice in a panic. He did not believe that Li Mu would dare to attack him in front of so many people in the divine capital. After the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Zhou Zhong walked out of a yamen. He patted the dust off his body and walked back into the Ministry of Justice's prison. In the cell, Li Qing stood up and looked at him. She asked, "What happened outside?" Zhou Zhong said, "It's nothing. Li Mu and Chen Jian are fighting." Li Qing said anxiously, "Go and stop him. Don't worry. As long as he doesn't kill Chen Jian will be the unlucky one in the end." Zhou Zhong looked at Li Qing, who was still nervous, and said, "Although he often did some crazy things in the past, he was still rational. For you, he even lost his rationality. Now, can you tell me what's the relationship between you two?" Chapter 358. Outside the Ministry of Justice, on the streets of Divine Capital. "You're crazy. You're really crazy. Li Mu, do you know the consequences of your actions? Li, I won't let you get away with this." The Assistant Minister of Personnel's expression changed from shock to fear. He did not expect Li Mu to attack him on the streets in front of the citizens of Divine Capital. Is this lunatic not afraid of the Imperial Court's punishment? The citizens on the streets were also dumbfounded by what they saw. Who else could it be other than young Master Li, whose entire body was shining with golden light, and was currently chasing after someone? Upon closer inspection, the person being beaten was wearing a high-ranked official's uniform. He seemed to be the Assistant Minister of Personnel. The commoners did not know much about the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. They only knew that he held a high position and was an important figure in the old party. Over the past few days, after the inside story of Lord Li's case was uncovered, they found out that this person was the mastermind who framed Lord Li. With that merit, he had risen to the top and was now sitting in Lord Li's position. It was absolutely detestable. Seeing Li Mu chasing after him and beating him up, the citizens felt an indescribable satisfaction. Well done. This kind of person will only cause trouble if we let him live. Let's just beat him to death. Sai, if we beat him to death, Li Mu will also get into big trouble. It's better to beat him up to vent our anger. Why is Li Mu so impulsive today? Is he also speaking up for Li Mu? The citizens did not dare to speak loudly. They could only whisper. Above their heads, waves of dermic powers quickly attracted a few figures. "Stop! How dare you fight here? Stop it!" A few generals in silver armor quickly flew over. They were about to stop the fight when they were surprised to find that it was the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel and Li Mu from the Secretariat, who were fighting in the sky above Luoyang. They did not know how to deal with it. If two cultivators dared to fight in Divine Capital, they would have been taken down long ago. But what was the reason for these two important officials to fight in front of so many people? Li Mu, the secretary of the Secretariat, was still in good condition. Only his hair was a little messy, but Chen Jian, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, had a bloody nose and a swollen face. Seeing the Imperial Guard generals who guarded Divine Capital arrive, Li Mu did not make things difficult for them. He stopped and quietly floated in the air. The Assistant Minister of Personnel covered his bruised eyes. He was furious. "What are you waiting for? Take him down." The Imperial Guard could not deal with the officials fighting. One general looked at the two officials and said, "Sirs, please follow us to His Majesty's side." Hearing the words His Majesty, the Assistant Minister of Personnel's heart skipped a beat. After weighing the pros and cons, he gritted his teeth and said, "Forget it. His Majesty is busy every day. Let's not disturb him over such a small matter. I have some misunderstanding with Li Mu." The Assistant Minister of Personnel was obviously the victim. He did not want to pursue the matter. The generals did not want to wait too long. Just as they were about to leave, Li Mu's face darkened. He said coldly, "It's a misunderstanding. Chen Jian, you cut off my path of cultivation and you want to let it go? Come follow me to His Majesty." Seeing that Li Mu was not going to let it go, the Imperial Guard generals were troubled. The leader weighed the pros and cons and said, "Sirs, let's go." Although they did not want to be a busybody, they had to deal with this matter as long as one person did not relent. Otherwise, they would be derelict in their duties. What they could not understand was that the Assistant Minister of Personnel had already decided to let it go. But the culprit was not going to let it go. In Shangyang Palace, Zhou was listening to the officials of the three provinces report on the state affairs. Mr. Mei walked in from outside and said with a strange expression, "Your Majesty, Chen Jian, the Assistant Minister of Personnel, and Li Mu from the Secretariat request an audience." Zhou said, "Let them in." Soon 2 figures walked in from outside. The first to walk in was Chen Jian, the Assistant Minister of Personnel. His clothes were messy, his official robe was untidy, his official hat was askew, and his face was covered in bruises. The officials were shocked. How did the Assistant Minister of Personnel, a master of the creation realm, end up like this? Chen Jian walked into the hall and said with grief and indignation, "Your Majesty." Li Mu walked past Chen Jian and walked in quickly. He said with grievance, "Your Majesty, you have to uphold justice for me." The Assistant Minister of Personnel was stunned. He stared blankly at Li Mu. He opened his mouth but did not say anything. He had been an official for many years, but he had never seen such a shameless person. In front of His Majesty, he dared to complain first. Without waiting for Li Mu to speak again, he immediately said, "Your Majesty, Li Mu from the Secretariat has disregarded the law and beat up an important official of the Imperial Court. Your Majesty, please punish him severely and uphold the law." In the hall, the officials of the three provinces finally knew that the Assistant Minister of Personnel was injured by Li Mu. Looking at Li Mu's appearance just now, they thought that the Assistant Minister of Personnel had done something to Li Mu. Zhou looked at Li Mu and asked, "What the Assistant Minister of Personnel said, is it true?" Li Mu said, "Your Majesty, I have a reason for my actions. Please investigate it." Zhou said, "No reason can be a reason for you to beat up an important official of the Imperial Court." Li Mu raised his head and said, "On the 10th day of the 10th month, the left Assistant Minister of Personnel, Chen Jian, verbally humiliated me in the Ministry of Personnel, causing me to develop an inner demon. Your Majesty, please show me the scene from that day." Zhou waved his hand and sent out a ray of white light. An image appeared above the heads of everyone in the hall. In the image, Li Mu was about to leave the Ministry of Personnel when the Assistant Minister of Personnel suddenly said, "Lord Li, you may not know this, but the Li residence you are living in now is the residence of that guilty official. The day before your wedding is the anniversary of the death of that guilty official's family. I wonder if you heard the wails of their ghosts on your wedding night." Seeing this scene, the Assistant Minister of Personnel's face paled. The officials in the hall finally understood why the Assistant Minister of Personnel had met such an end. Even if it was an ordinary person's wedding, there would still be some good luck. It was very taboo for people to say anything inauspicious. Who could tolerate such verbal humiliation on the day of someone's wedding? Moreover, this kind of humiliation had caused the person involved to develop an inner demon. In the cultivation world, this was probably not something that could be settled with a simple beating. Ruining the path of cultivation was a great enmity that would not rest until one of them was dead. Zhou looked at the Assistant Minister of Personnel and asked, "Do you have anything else to say?" The Assistant Minister of Personnel hurriedly explained, Your Majesty, I was muddle-headed at that time, Zhou Yi said coldly. Being muddle-headed is not an excuse for ruining the Dao hearts of your colleagues. The Assistant Minister of Personnel hurriedly knelt and said in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, please forgive me, Zhou Yi said indifferently. Assistant Minister of Personnel, Chen Jian, humiliated a colleague. The consequences are serious. His moral conduct is lacking. He will be suspended from his duties for a month and his salary will be deducted for half a year. The ministers in the hall glanced at the Assistant Minister of Personnel and sighed in their hearts. Chen Jian really had no foresight. Li Mu was the favored minister of the Empress. Chen Jian dared to drag Li Mu to meet the Empress when he knew that he was in the wrong. Wasn't he walking right into a trap? The officials of the 3 provinces still had to report to the political leaders. After the Empress concluded the case of Li Mu and Chen Jian, the 2 of them walked out of Shangyang Palace. Today's humiliation will be avenged in the future. Chen Jian took one last look at Li Mu, covered his face with his sleeves, and left in a hurry. Li Mu walked slowly in the palace, but his thoughts were running fast. He and Li Yi shared the same residence. According to his original plan, he would take the long view and plan step by step. When the time was right, he would overturn the case for Li Yi and clear his name. This way, he could minimize the impact on the situation in the imperial court and would not cause too much trouble for the Empress. As for the person who caused these cases, he could only try his best to save his life. Even if he did not succeed in the end, he had already done what he should have done. Regarding this matter, he did not ask for anything other than peace of mind. This was the most rational thing to do. However, when he saw the figure in the prisoner carriage, he threw all rationality and plans to the back of his mind. The first thing he needed to do now was to get Li Qing out of the Ministry of Justice. Although Zhou Zhong was in the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong happened to be the person Li Mu did not trust the most. Li Mu knew very well that Zhou Zhong had actually given up on her just now. In Zhou Zhong's heart, there was something that he thought was more noble. After thinking for a while, the only person Li Mu could trust at the moment was Zhang Chun. The power of the Zongjing Temple had been further expanded recently. The cases that the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court could handle were handled by the Zongjing Temple. The cases that the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court could not handle were handled by the Zongjing Temple. Li Mu first returned to the Secretariat and drafted an official document with the identity of the Secretariat's secretary. After that, he asked Mr. Mei to ask the Empress to temporarily interrupt the debriefing of the officials of the 3 provinces and put the Empress's seal on the document. After that, he went to the Zongjing Temple and handed the document to Zhang Chun, asking him to transfer Li Qing from the Ministry of Justice to the Zongjing Temple. Although the Ministry of Justice and the Zongjing Temple were controlled by the old party, at least Zhang Chun was in the Zongjing Temple. In the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong received the document and said to the director of the Ministry of Justice, "Open the prison." Soon, a carriage drove out of the Ministry of Justice and slowly into the palace, heading in the direction of the Zongjing Temple. The Zongjing Temple mostly dealt with the important officials of the imperial court and the royal family's disciples. In consideration of their dignity, they did not want the people to throw vegetables and eggs at them when they were escorting important people through the streets. The prisoner carriage of the Zongjing Temple was a modified carriage, sealed and hidden. In the Zongjing Temple, Prince Shou was lying in the courtyard of the Zongjing Temple, basking in the sun. When he saw the carriage enter the Zongjing Temple, he asked, "Who committed the crime this time?" Minister Feng, who was squatting beside him and fanning him, said, "It's Li Yi's daughter. It's said that she killed 5 officials outside and was brought back to Fairy's capital by the Office of Worship. She's waiting for trial." Li Yi. Prince Shou narrowed his eyes, as if he was lost in his memories. Minister Feng said, "It's that Li Yi who caused a huge ruckus in Fairy's capital more than 10 years ago. Later, his entire family was executed. I didn't expect that there would be one left out. Li Yi from more than 10 years ago, and now Li Mu. Why is this surnamed Li not to be trifled with?" As he spoke, he thought of something and said to Prince Shou, "Your Highness, you have to take care of that Zhang Chun. I don't know what he's thinking, but he arranged for Li Yi's daughter's cell to be the same as the wedding room. Not only did he choose the largest and most spacious cell, he even arranged for people to clean it inside and out. He changed the big bed, brand new bedding, and even a mirror and dressing table. He even locked all the prisoners around that cell elsewhere and hung curtains around the cell. How is this a prison at the Zongjing Temple? She's clearly a young mistress. I just want to bask in the sun. Why do you have so much nonsense to say? Prince Shou glared at him and said, Are you very free? If you have nothing to do, go wash all the toilets. Don't bother me here. Minister Feng was stunned and said, Your Highness. Prince Shou said angrily, Go. In the Zongjing Temple's outhouse, Minister Feng was washing the toilets gloomily. In the courtyard, Prince Shou was lying on a rocking chair with his hands behind his head. He sighed and said, What a pity. Why are young people so impulsive? In the Zongjing Temple's prison, Zhang Chun stood outside the cell and shook his head. I didn't expect Constable Li to be Lord Li Yi's daughter. Back then, I also admired him very much. Li Mu looked at Zhang Chun and said, I'll leave the boss to you. Zhang Chun said, Don't worry. As long as she's in the Zongjing Temple, no one will dare to touch her. He looked at Li Mu and asked, What do you plan to do? Whether it's to redress Lord Li Yi's grievances or to exonerate Li Qing's crimes, it's not that simple. At present, Li Qing's matter was naturally Li Mu's greatest concern, and also the most urgent matter. But if he wanted to save Li Qing, he had to redress her father's case first. If Li Qing's identity was still that of a treacherous official who had colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country, then what Li Qing did was a complete blow and revenge. She had killed many officials of the imperial court, and should be sentenced to death according to the law. If Li Mu insisted on saving her, he would be going against the law and above the law. In this way, what difference would there be between him and those people he despised? However, if Li Yi's identity was that of a loyal official who was set up by a villain and had his entire family exterminated, then his daughter avenged his family's death. Even if it was against the law, it would still be righteous. Under the premise that the imperial court had lost its righteousness, there was still mercy outside the law. After all, the 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel were the ones who had directly framed Li Yi. They had framed a 4th-rank official of the imperial court and caused his family to be killed unjustly. These 4 people were already sentenced to death. Under such circumstances, Li Mu had a slight chance of saving Li Qing. And the premise of all this was that he had to redress Li Yi's case first. Li Mu walked into the cell in front of him. The shackles on Li Qing's body had already been removed and her mana had also been unsealed. Li Mu walked to her side and sat down. He said, Give me your hand. Li Qing slowly handed her hand to Li Mu. His hand emitted a gentle golden light which slowly entered Li Qing's body. Li Mu said, I can't get you out right away. I may have to trouble you for a while. Stay here for now. Li Qing looked around and said, This should be the best room I've ever stayed in. Li Mu looked at her and said, Don't worry, I will investigate the matter of that year as soon as possible and clear Lord Li's name. Li Qing shook her head slightly and said, Now I understand that my father doesn't want revenge. He and Uncle Zhou have more important things to do. I hope you can help my father finish what he couldn't before he died. Don't ruin your future for me. Li Mu smiled and said, Only children make choices. I choose both. He looked into Li Qing's eyes and said, Someone has already done the first thing. If I can't save you, then the second thing is meaningless to me. Let Zhou Zhong finish his and Uncle Zhou's dreams. At worst, I'll take you back to Fulu School. We don't want to stay in Fairy's capital anymore. As Li Mu finished speaking, he heard Mr. May's voice. He turned around and saw the Empress and Mr. May standing at the door. The Empress looked at him indifferently and turned to leave. Seeing Mr. May winking at him, Li Mu looked at Li Qing and said, I'll go out for a while. After comforting Li Qing, Li Mu hurried out of Zongjing Temple, but he couldn't see the Empress anymore. He jogged to the entrance of Changel Palace. Mr. May looked inside the palace and gave him a look. Li Mu walked slowly into the palace and looked at the Empress who had her back to him. He whispered, Your Majesty. Zhou Qiong said indifferently, Why did you come looking for me? Go back to your talisman school. Being a second-generation disciple of the talisman school, is much better than being a subordinate of mine. After comforting one, he had to comfort the other. Li Mu wanted to slap his own mouth a few times. He squeezed out a smile and said, "Your Majesty, what are you talking about? I haven't repaid your Majesty's kindness. How could I leave Shindu?" Zhou said indifferently. "My kindness is nothing compared to a random woman in your heart, right?" Li Mu said slowly. "She's not a random woman. If it weren't for her, I would have died many times over. I wouldn't be standing in front of your Majesty now." He looked up at the Empress and said, "I want to ask your Majesty for a favor." Zhou Yi's back was facing Li Mu. She looked angry. She was still angry, but he was begging her again? She took a deep breath and asked, "If I don't agree, are you going to take her back to Fulu school?" The Empress was still angry. Li Mu lowered his head and said, "I know I'm wrong." Zhou Yi turned around and looked at him. Her lips moved, but she couldn't bear to blame him anymore. She asked, "What's your relationship with her?" Li Mu said, "When we were in Yangqiu County, she was my superior. She saved my life and led me onto the path of cultivation. Her father is Lord Li Yi. I've always looked up to Lord Li Yi as my role model. I can't turn a blind eye to his family's wrongful death. I have to help him." Zhou Yi asked, "How do you want me to help you? Give you a death exemption medallion?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "If your Majesty gives me a death exemption medallion, how is that different from the previous emperor? I can't frame your Majesty. I just hope that your Majesty can allow me to reinvestigate the case and prove Lord Li's innocence." Zhou Yi said, "Even if I let you reinvestigate, you might not be able to save her. You really don't want me to pardon her?" Li Mu said firmly, "I only want to reinvestigate the case." Zhou Yi was silent for a moment. She said, "I promise you, before you find out the truth, no one can touch her for any reason." Li Mu sighed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Li Mu left Changel Palace. Mr. Mei came in and said, "Actually, in his heart he's always been thinking about Your Majesty." Zhou Yi snorted and said, "Heartless. I'm afraid he only wants to go back to Fulu school. He said he would go through fire and water for me, but it's all fake." Mr. Mei knew that the Empress didn't mean what she said, so he deliberately said, "If he didn't think about Your Majesty, he would have asked Your Majesty to pardon the girl directly. Why would he just ask Your Majesty to allow him to reinvestigate the case? In the past, he wasn't afraid of anything and dared to offend anyone. Now he cares about the court and thinks about Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please don't blame him." After leaving Changel Palace, Li Mu returned to Zongjing Temple. He told Li Qing that the Empress had agreed to let him reinvestigate the case of the past. After feeling his determination several times, Li Qing didn't insist. She just said, "You have to be careful." Li Mu smiled and said, "Don't worry. I've already offended them anyway. It doesn't matter if I offend them a few more times. You rest well. I'll come see you tomorrow." He walked out of the cell, but his heart was still heavy. To save Li Qing was actually more difficult than to reverse the verdict for his father. At one point, he really wanted to ask the Empress for a death-free gold medallion. He also knew that as long as he asked, the Empress would give it to him. But he gave up in the end. He didn't want to put the Empress in a difficult position, and he didn't want to become the person he used to hate the most. There was also a very important point. Back then, Li Yi strongly opposed the death-free gold medallion. This was also one of the reasons why he was framed. If Li Mu begged the Empress to use the death-free gold medallion to pardon Li Qing, then the thing that Li Yi swore to fight against back then would become a joke. Similarly, what Li Mu did in the divine capital during this period of time would also become a joke. Big. Small. Again. In the courtyard of Zongjing Temple, Prince Shou was playing dice with Zhang Chun. He glanced at Li Mu and asked, "Little Li, do you want to play together?" Li Qing was still in Zongjing Temple. Li Mu couldn't not give face to Prince Shou. He walked to the side of the two and asked, "What do you want to play?" Prince Shou said, "Guess big or small. It's very simple. Do you have money? 1 round is 1 tael. No credit." Li Mu took out a stack of banknotes and placed it at the side. Prince Shou's eyes lit up when he saw the banknotes. He said, Come, come, come. Let's bet. Prince Show's dice and dice pot seemed to be able to block magic power. Li Mu could only guess blindly. However, his luck wasn't bad. Prince Show lost 10 rounds in a row. He had lost all the money he had. His eyes were red from losing. He picked up the dice pot and said, "Let's bet again." Zhang Chun kept his winnings. He glanced at Prince Shou and said, "Your Highness, you have lost all your money. What are you going to bet with?" Prince Shou flew into a rage. "How dare you look down on me?" Smack. He slammed a gold medal on the table and said, "I still have this." The gold medal was the size of a palm. The word exempt was written on it. Li Mu looked at Prince Shou thoughtfully and said, "Your Highness, this gold medal is very precious. You should keep it well. It won't be good if you lose," Prince Shou said angrily. "Even you think I will lose? Let me tell you, when I was invincible in the Immortals' capital, you were still in your mother's womb. Come, come, come. I still want to recoup my losses." Li Mu shook his head and said, "This gold medal is stained with too much blood. If your Highness dares to lose, we don't dare to take it." Hearing Li Mu's words, Prince Shou kept the gold medal and said, "Hee, I almost forgot. If you guys take the gold medal to save that girl, wouldn't I become a traitor?" Prince Shou clicked his tongue and said, "What a pity. The only thing that can save that girl is this gold medal. She killed so many officials. No one can save her. Unless you have the ability to reverse the verdict for her father, and let His Majesty announce this case to the world. Then let the people of the 36 counties write a blood letter to plead for her so that the imperial court won't dare to kill her." He looked at Li Mu mockingly and asked, "Do you have the ability?" Chapter 359. Li Mu and Zhang Chun walked out of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and left the Imperial Palace together. Zhang Chun was silent for a long time before he suddenly asked, "Li Mu, did you grow up in Yangqiu County?" Li Mu was thinking about something else, so he asked casually, "Why are you asking this?" Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "I'm just asking. By the way, why do you think King Shou is so good to you?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Who knows?" Li Mu couldn't think of a reason why King Shou would always give them pointers at critical moments. Maybe he was just doing it for justice. After all, human nature was complicated, and you can't label a person as good or evil just because of their background or faction. Regardless of the reason, King Shou's words did make Li Mu suddenly see the light. What does the continuation of the Great Zhou rely on? It's not the imperial court, not the imperial family, but the people. It's the psyche power of the people. What the imperial court is most afraid of is losing the people's hearts. They may not care about a city, but they won't care about a county, 10 counties, or even 36 counties. The law of the Great Zhou is to protect the weak and the people, but this is only on the surface. The existence of the law is to maintain the rule of the imperial court. Because only when the people live and work in peace can the psyche power be continuously produced. The emperor's chi can be nurtured, and the upper realm powerhouses of the imperial family can be endlessly produced, ensuring the stability of the country. No matter how fierce the imperial court is, the prosperity of the Great Zhou will always be the goal of everyone. King Shou's words can be said to have awakened the people in the dream. Li Mu walked out of the imperial palace. Unexpectedly, there were already many people outside the imperial palace. Seeing Li Mu walk out, they immediately surrounded him. "Lord Li, how is it? His Majesty didn't punish you, right?" "Lord Li was too impulsive. You shouldn't have fought with that person. Isn't this dirtying your hands?" Feeling the concern of the people, Li Mu smiled and said, "Everyone, don't worry. His Majesty is a righteous person. How could he punish me?" A man breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "That's good, that's good. Lord Li is worthy of being His Majesty's favorite minister. If I knew this would happen, I would have hit him harder. Break his legs. This kind of treacherous person, it's not too much. Lord Li's family, he will die a horrible death." Among the crowd, the Lord Li Mu, "Lord Li, is Lord Li E, Lord Li was Li is?" The crowd also looked at Li Mu. With a profound look in his eyes, Li Mu said, "Official Li E is the role model of our generation." "I know. Lord is brave. Lord Li died. As Li Li's house. Even now we still can't take it lying down. The crowd was filled with righteous indignation as they spoke one after another. At this moment, the man bit his lip and suddenly looked at Li Mu. He said, "My lord, can you save Lord Li's daughter? She's Lord Li's only child left in this world." "Stop talking." The middle-aged man glared at him and said in a deep voice, "Do you want to kill, sir?" Sighs could be heard from the crowd. Yes, Lord Li was the enemy of all the nobles back then. Now those people are in high positions. Lord Li, it's best not to provoke them. Forget it. Lord Li, you can go ahead. You can't follow in Lord Li's footsteps. The man's eyes were filled with tears. He choked and said, "If it wasn't for Lord Li, my family would have died in Fairy's capital. I can't watch Lord Li die." His voice was mournful. The people around Li Mu lowered their heads. Their eyes were filled with suppressed anger. Lord Li had served the people wholeheartedly, but his family was ruined and his descendants were about to die. On the other hand, those who had framed him had become heroes, enjoying endless glory and wealth, riding on the heads of the common people and abusing them. They could do nothing about it except feel indignant. A man of 7 feet could not help but sob in front of everyone on the streets of Fairy's capital. No one laughed. Everyone's mood was very heavy. The man lowered his head. As he sobbed and trembled, a pair of hands landed gently on his shoulders. Li Mu patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry. Lord Li won't die. He won't be wronged forever." The man raised his head and said in shock, "Lord Li! Lord Li! Lord Li!" The people looked at Li Mu. They seemed to have realized something. Their eyes were filled with excitement. Li residence. When Li Mu walked through the door, Hian Jinko and Yu Zhenzi in the courtyard sensed something strange. Hian Jinko turned to look. The moment Li Mu stepped into the courtyard, he felt as if the world was pressing down on him. This was a force. It was a force that should not exist on a fourth realm cultivator. Yu Zhenzi said in disbelief. His psychokinesis has already formed a force. No wonder his cultivation progress is so fast. Very few people can complete psychokinesis cultivation. Li Mu retracted his newly acquired psychokinesis back into his body. Lu Hanyan walked over quickly and asked, "How is it?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "She's safe for now. But to save her, we have to think about it carefully." Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and asked, "Can't we ask Her Majesty to pardon her?" Li Mu said, "It's not that easy, but it's okay. Her Majesty has already agreed to let me reinvestigate Lord Li Yi's case. After Lord Li's case is overturned, things will be much simpler. Actually, he only begged the Empress today to show her his attitude. This case involved too many people. Whether Li Mu proposed it or the Empress ordered it, they would definitely encounter great resistance." Back then, Li Yi offended the rich and powerful. Among them were the Xiao royal family and the Zhou clan. They indirectly contributed to the massacre of the Li clan. Of course, they would not let Li Mu reinvestigate the old case so easily. Therefore, Li Mu needed help. Help that even the great Zhou court could not ignore. He walked into the courtyard and said, "Senior brother Hian Jinko, there's something I need your help with." Hian Jinko said, "Junior brother, there's no harm in asking. You're welcome." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "I might need you to return to Mount Baiyun and meet senior brother Sect Master personally." Ministry of Justice. In the Assistant Minister's office, the Right Assistant Minister of Personnel looked at Zhou Zhong and asked with a frown. That Li clan survivor was taken away by the Imperial Clan Temple. Why didn't you stop them? Zhou Zhong asked. The official documents of the Secretariat have Her Majesty's Imperial seal on them. Who would dare to stop them? Gao Hong stroked the short beard on his chin and asked in confusion, "But why did the Secretariat want to transfer her to the Imperial Clan Temple?" Zhou Zhong said, "That official document was written by Li Mu. In my opinion, he probably wants to overturn the case for Li Yi." Gao Hong looked at him and said, "If I remember correctly, Li Yi was once Lord Zhou's close friend. Why? Does Lord Zhou not want to see him be convicted?" Zhou Zhong looked at him calmly and asked, "Are you a pig?" Gao Hong slammed the table and said angrily, "What did you say?" Chen Jian, the left assistant minister of personnel, whose injuries were almost healed after taking a pill, walked over and said, Lord Gao, your question is a little stupid. Back then, Lord Zhou was also involved in the impeachment of Li Yi. If Li Yi's case is overturned, you, me, and even Lord Zhou will be sentenced to death. Do you think he would seek his own death? The right assistant minister of personnel sat down again and said, My apologies, Lord Zhou. I was rash. Chen Jian said angrily, 14 years ago Li Yi. 14 years later Li Mu. Does this Li guy have a grudge against us? As long as we don't get rid of him, we won't have a day of peace. Zhou Zhong said, If you want to get rid of him, why don't you think about it? If he really wants to overturn the case for Li Yi, won't you and I be in danger? Chen Jian laughed coldly and said, Then he still needs to find evidence. It's easy to prove that he colluded with the enemy and committed treason. 14 years have passed. How can he prove that Li Yi didn't collude with the enemy and commit treason? Even if he proves it, then what? Zhou Chuan is also involved in this matter. Do you want His Majesty to execute his uncle? Even if His Majesty dotes on Li Mu and doesn't recognize his own family, how can the courtiers agree to it? If this case isn't investigated, the imperial court will still be the imperial court. If this case is investigated, the imperial court might not be the imperial court anymore. When that time comes, the imperial court will be in chaos. The 10 Devil Path sects, the country of 10,000 demons, and the ghost region of Yudu will all become restless. His Majesty might not be able to see these things clearly, but do you think those old fogies in the imperial court won't be able to see it clearly? Zhou Zhong nodded and said, After hearing Lord Chen's words, I feel much more at ease. Chen Jian said proudly, Lord Zhou might be better at solving cases than I am. But you still have to learn from me when it comes to matters of the imperial court. Changle Palace. There was no morning assembly today. Zhou Yi read a few memorials and felt a little annoyed. He asked, Where's Li Mu? Did he go to the minister province today? Mr. Mei said, I saw him go directly to the imperial kitchen just now. Zhou Yi thought about it and said, Go to the minister province later and see if there are any new tributes. Send some to him. Mr. Mei smiled and said, Yes. She was about to leave when Shangguanli walked in from outside. Zhou Yi said, Ali, go to the imperial kitchen and see what Li Mu cooked today. Shangguanli said, When I passed by the imperial kitchen just now, I saw Li Mu come out from there. Zhou Yi asked, You didn't come with him? Shangguanli shook his head and said, He went in the direction of the imperial clan temple. Zhou Yi was stunned for a moment. The next moment he looked at the door of the hall and said, Mei Wei, come back. Chapter 360. The Empress had told Li Mu not to bring food from home, but to cook in the imperial kitchen, which reminded Li Mu of something. The taste of takeout couldn't be compared to the food in the kitchen. The food box could only keep the food warm, but it couldn't preserve the taste. The best time to appreciate most of the food was when it was just out of the pot. Fortunately, the ancestral temple was in the palace. It was only a few steps away, so the taste of the food wouldn't change too much. Compared to the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court, the imperial prison of the ancestral temple was of a much higher standard. The prisoners here were either rich or noble. They were either relatives of the emperor or high-ranking officials. Especially in the past, the ancestral temple was a shelter for the descendants of the imperial family after they committed crimes. The facilities and treatment inside were far from what the other government offices could compare to, especially after Zhang Chun's special arrangement. If the prison of the Ministry of Justice was a standard single room for 7 days, then the one Li Qing of the ancestral temple was now living in the Hilton Hotel's presidential suite. The food in the ancestral temple should be good, but Li Mu was still worried that she wouldn't be used to it. Inside the ancestral temple, the morning sun was just right. Zhang Chun and Prince Shou sat in the courtyard of the ancestral temple, basking in the sun while drinking tea. Zhang Chun personally brewed a cup for Prince Shou and asked with a smile, Your Highness, this is a good tea that I've collected. Try it. Prince Shou took a small sip and said, Not bad. I didn't expect you to be a tea lover. Do you have any more of this tea? Give me 8 to 10 caddies. I'll take it back and drink it slowly, Zhang Chun said regretfully. Unfortunately, this is the last pinch. Prince Shou looked at him with disdain. He suddenly sniffed and said, What's this smell? It's so fragrant. Zhang Chun's nose also sniffed. After recalling the aftertaste, he murmured, This smell, why is it so similar to the smell of the noodle stall on the street outside the county office when I was in Yangqiu County? He couldn't help but gulp and said, That old woman's noodles are really amazing. I really want to try it again. Li Mu carried the food box and walked into the ancestral temple. He greeted Zhang Chun and said, I'm going to deliver the food to the boss. Zhang Chun had already warned the officers of the imperial prison of the Zongjing Temple. When they saw Li Mu coming in from afar, the guard in charge of the imperial prison opened the door. Before Li Mu entered the prison, Zhang Chun walked over and asked, You cook noodles? Li Mu nodded and said, The boss used to like eating noodles from that restaurant the most. Zhang Chun rubbed his hands and said, This official also likes this. Do you have any more? Give this official a bowl. Using the Empress's kitchen to cook noodles for someone else and leaving her aside. Even if Li Mu was really stupid, he wouldn't do such a stupid thing. It was just that the Empress's soup took a little longer to cook. Li Mu went to the Imperial Clan Temple and waited for a little while before the soup was ready. It was said that he relied on women to make a living. After Li Mu's unremitting efforts, now the Empress and Li Qing both relied on him to make a living. Li Mu carried the soup and came to the entrance of Chang'e Palace. Shangguanli stood at the entrance of the palace and glanced at him. Her Majesty is not here. You can go back. Li Mu said regretfully, What a pity. I boiled this soup for Her Majesty for more than 4 hours. It won't taste good after a while. I'll bring it back to the secretariat and drink it myself. Just as he turned around, Shangguanli's ears twitched and said, Her Majesty has returned. Li Mu handed the soup in his hand to him and said, I have to go back to the secretariat. I'll have to trouble Commander Shangguan to bring it in for Her Majesty. Shangguanli carried the soup into Chang'e Palace and placed it on the table in front of Zhou Yi. After opening the lid of the soup, a fresh and rich aroma floated out. Mr. May's throat moved and he smiled. I knew it. How could he forget Her Majesty? This soup has been simmering for so long. He must have put in a lot of effort. I just went to the Imperial kitchen and asked. He only sent a bowl of noodles to the Imperial Clan Temple. Zhou drank a mouthful of soup and suddenly felt a little embarrassed. It seemed that she had misunderstood Li Mu just now. She thought that he was using her Imperial kitchen to curry favor with others. She was angry for a while, but at this moment, the anger in her heart immediately disappeared. She said, Mei Wei, send 2 boxes of Southern Tribute oranges to him. Mr. May said. Didn't Her Majesty say that the oranges were very sour and she didn't want to send them? Zhou said, Now that I think about it, the oranges don't seem so sour anymore. Mr. May nodded and said, I'll go now. Zhou suddenly said, Wait. The secretariat. Li Mu sat in the duty room for a while. After dealing with the official business for the day, he sat quietly for a while and began to write an official document. This official document ordered the Ministry of Justice to reinvestigate the case of Li Yi from 14 years ago. Li Mu had asked the Empress about this matter, but he couldn't let the Empress give the order directly. As the ruler of a country, she should have the concept of the overall situation. If she overturned half of the court just because of Li Mu's words, then what would the court officials think? They would think that this was a treacherous courtier trying to overthrow the government. When an emperor ignored the overall situation of the court and the people of the Great Zhou because of a certain courtier or concubine, the courtiers would unite to oppose her because this was a sign of the collapse of the country. The courtiers would not allow it, and the 4 academies would not sit idly by. In fact, compared to this matter, whether or not Li Yi was wronged or not was not that important anymore. Therefore, Li Mu had to show that although the Empress doted on him, there was a limit. Once he exceeded that limit, he was afraid that he would be removed in the name of cleaning up the emperor's side. Before he finished writing the official document in his hand, Mr. May came. She placed 2 boxes of oranges on the table in front of Li Mu and said, "These are the tribute oranges from South Commandery. Her Majesty asked me to give you 2 boxes to try." Li Mu said, "Thank Her Majesty for me." Mr. May said, "Her Majesty doesn't want your thanks." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "What else does Her Majesty want?" He had already given the Empress everything he could. She could not reward Li Mu with 2 boxes of oranges and ask for too much from him. Mr. May glanced at him and said, "In the future, no matter if you make soup or noodles in the imperial kitchen, send it to Changle Palace first." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "This is Her Majesty's idea?" Mr. May knocked him on the head and said, "Her Majesty is so broad-minded. Would she be angry because you sent her soup later?" Only she believed this sentence. No one knew how stingy the Empress was better than Li Mu. Li Mu nodded helplessly and said, "I know. No matter what I do in the future, I will think of Her Majesty first. Is that okay?" After that he was knocked on the head again. Mr. May glanced at him and asked, "What's with your tone? It sounds like Her Majesty is forcing you to send the soup first." Li Mu promised her that he was willing to give priority to the Empress. Only then did Mr. May leave with satisfaction. Li Mu looked at her back and felt that she was getting more and more strange these days. If this continued, it would be really difficult for her to get married. But Li Mu had more important things to do and did not have time to give her psychological counseling. He finished writing the official document, took 2 tribute oranges, and went to the assistant minister's office. Lu Yi was reading the booklet. Li Mu walked over and put the 2 oranges on his table. He said, "Mr. Lu, take a rest and eat an orange." Lu Yi looked at the 2 oranges and said in surprise, "It's not the season for oranges yet. There are a few mother trees in Nanjun that will bear fruit a month or 2 earlier, but the spiritual oranges on the mother trees are used as tributes." Li Mu smiled and said, "This is the tribute oranges given by Her Majesty." Lu Yi looked at Li Mu with envy and said, "Mr. Li, you are really enviable. There are not many spiritual oranges, and there is not enough for the palace every year. It is difficult for the officials outside to get one. In the time of the former emperor, only the Empress and the imperial noble concubines could get a box." He only picked up 1 orange and said, "I only need one of these treasures. I didn't expect to taste spiritual oranges from my hometown in Luoyang." Li Mu said, "So Mr. Lu's hometown is Nanjun. It's okay. Mr. Lu, you can eat as much as you want. If it's not enough, I have more. Her Majesty gave me 2 boxes." Lu Yi was not only envious but also shocked. Back then, the Empress Dowager and Imperial Concubine Dowager were so favored by the previous emperor, but they only received 2 chests in total. His Majesty actually rewarded Li Mu with 2 chests. It was true that she only favored 1 person in all the court officials. He peeled an orange and ate a few pieces. He praised, "It is indeed a carefully cultivated tribute. If a mortal can eat one, they will not be invaded by diseases for 3 years." The 2 chatted for a while. Li Mu took out the document and said, "By the way, there is another document here that needs your signature. It's a small matter." Lu Yi picked up the document. She picked up the pen and was about to sign her name. Then his body trembled. The pen in his hand did not fall. He looked at the document and fell into a long silence. After a while he looked up at Li Mu and said with some bitterness, "Mr. Li, I only ate half of your orange." Chapter 361. Li Mu looked at Lu Yi and said with a smile, "Lord Lu, this is a spirit orange carefully cultivated by the South Commandery. If a mortal can eat one, they will not be invaded by diseases for 3 years." Lu Yi was speechless for a moment. Finally he sighed and asked, "Have you thought about it, Lord Li?" Li Mu said, "I once made a great vow to establish my heart for the world and my life for the people. How can I watch the heroes of the great Zhou be framed by villains and leave behind a torrent of infamy in history?" Lu Yi picked up the pen helplessly and said, "Give me 2 more oranges." Li Mu stretched out his hand, and 2 more spirit oranges appeared in his hand. Lu Yi signed his name on the document and shook his head. "I hope Lord Li has good luck." Li Mu clasped his fist and said, "Thank you, Lord Lu." Lu Yi waved his hand and said, "You're welcome. This document has to be handed over. It's useless for me to sign it." Li Mu said again, "Lord Lu, please give this to the head of the secretariat." When he left the assistant minister's office, he took away the orange peel on the table and threw it away for Lu Yi. Lu Yi hurriedly said, "Lord Li, please wait. I'll soak the orange peel in water." Ordinary people could not even get the orange peel of the spirit orange that was specially offered by the royal family. Li Mu decided to finish the orange and collect the orange peel. In the future, when he asked Lu Yi for help, he would give him a few taels each time. After all, it was not good to ask for help empty-handed. Li Mu alone could not make the decision to reinvestigate the old case from 14 years ago. After his proposal, it needed to go through the assistant minister and head of the secretariat first. Then it would be handed over to the minister for review. Finally, it would be handed over to the minister for implementation. Li Mu could only deal with Lu Yi. The Lu family was one of the oldest surnames in the Great Zhou. It was one of the 9 surnames. Although it was not as powerful as the Xiao family and the Zhou family in the imperial court, it could not be underestimated. At the very least, Lu Yi did not have to be afraid of the old and new parties. When Lu Yi saw Li Mu walk out of the assistant minister's office, she put away the orange peel, picked up the document, and went to another office. He placed the booklet on the table and said, "Sir, this booklet is from Li Sharon." The head of the secretariat stroked the long beard on his chin and opened the booklet. After looking at it, he pondered for a moment and signed his name on it. He handed it back to Lu Yi and said, "Pass it to the door." Moments later, in Munxia province, it was a letter from the secretariat. After it was delivered to the Munxia province, it was passed down through the ranks until it finally reached the hands of 2 attendants. The attendant was a provincial official. In the hearts of some of the officials, the truth of Li Yi's case was no longer important. What was important was whether the emperor's love and care for Li Mu had reached the limit of what an official should bear. Many times, there was no clear boundary between a treacherous official and a loyal official. Although what he did was righteous, if the imperial court collapsed because of him and the Great Zhou fell into a crisis, then he would be a treacherous official who brought disaster to the country and the people. This kind of treacherous official should be eliminated by all the officials. There were even many officials who had a grudge against Li Mu. They were secretly plotting whether they should take advantage of this opportunity to join forces with their respective parties to clean up the emperor and punish the traitorous officials. However, during the morning court, Li Mu remained silent and did not mention a single word about the old case. This was not unexpected by some officials. Perhaps he also realized that if he wanted to investigate the old case, it would involve too many people. Not only would he not be able to find any results, but he would also be implicated. Thus, he was afraid of retreating. This made some people feel disappointed. Compared to Li Mu retreating in the face of difficulties, they hoped that he would walk this path to the end. This would give them a chance to get rid of him. Just like this, the matter that had caused widespread discussion in the various departments yesterday was not mentioned in the morning court today. Just as the officials thought that this matter was going to be forgotten, Mr. Mei walked in from outside the hall. He walked behind the curtain and seemed to say something to the Empress. Soon, the Empress's voice came from behind the curtain. "Enter." A figure slowly floated into the crepe myrtle hall. He bowed to the Empress behind the curtain and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." This was a middle-aged man wearing a moon-white Taoist robe. His hair was tied up in a tall crown, and he looked like an immortal. On the left chest of his Taoist robe was embroidered the symbol of a white cloud. White Cloud Mountain. Moon-white Taoist robe, a second-generation disciple of the Fulu school. Could he be the head of one of the peaks? What is the head of the Fulu school doing in the divine capital? The officials looked at the middle-aged man in confusion. Although the Fulu school and the imperial court cooperated, it was limited to low-level disciples. This was the first time they saw such an important figure of the Fulu school in the divine capital, in this golden hall. The Empress asked calmly, "Taoist Hyunjinko, why have you come to the divine capital?" Hyunjinko said, I am here on the orders of the headmaster for one person. The empress asked, who? Hyun Jinko said. Her name is Li Qing. She is the direct disciple of the headmaster. If this matter isn't handled well, the Fulu school will hate him. That would be bad. But if they really want to investigate, it's fine if there's no problem. If there really is a problem, there will be a storm in the imperial court. Minister Zhou looked at the head of the secretariat and asked, Elder Yan, what do you think? Of the 4 people, the head of the secretariat had been through 3 dynasties. He was the most senior. The head of the secretariat thought for a while and said, the 2 attendants have said so much about the stability of the imperial court. Have you thought about what if Assistant Minister Li was really wronged? The left attendant sighed and said, the bigger picture is more important. The head of the secretariat said slowly, indeed, the bigger picture is more important. When the head of the secretariat said this, the 3 people in the hall fell into silence. The left attendant and the head of the secretariat were not talking about the same big picture. Compared to the injustice Li Yi had suffered, the stability of the imperial court was more important. Compared to the stability of the imperial court, the relationship with the Fulu school was more important. The imperial court was temporarily in chaos, but it would eventually return to stability. If the relationship with the Fulu school was broken, no matter how stable the imperial court was, it would not be able to create a powerful ally like the Fulu school out of thin air. After a long silence, the left attendant said helplessly, investigate. The right attendant sighed and said, we can only do this. A day later, the 3 provinces gave a reply to Li Yi's case. The Fulu school was a friend of the great Zhou. The imperial court attached great importance to the reasonable request of the Fulu school. The 3 provinces discussed and decided that the Supreme Court and Zongjing Temple would work together to investigate the case of Assistant Minister Li Yi of the Ministry of Personnel. Regarding this, the Imperial Secretariat had already drafted an imperial edict, and it had been reviewed and approved. Because the case of that year involved the officials of the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Justice was purposely avoided. Usually, this kind of matter would go through the procedures of the 3 provinces. It would take at least half a month for there to be a result. This time, all the procedures were completed in one day. It was enough to show the sincerity of the imperial court toward the Fulu school. This was something that could not be helped. Prince Shou had spoken rudely to the head of the Fulu school in the imperial court. This had already pushed the relationship between the imperial court and the Fulu school to the brink of danger. If they did not do their best to make up for it, it would be difficult to heal the animosity between the 2 sides. Zongjing Temple, the prison. Li Qing looked at Li Mu with some astonishment. Otherwise, it would be a good choice for him to stay in the palace for the rest of his life. The Imperial Secretariat. Li Mu was thinking about what to do next. Suddenly he felt a chill in his crotch. His heart was suddenly alerted. However, he looked around and didn't find any danger. After eating a tribute orange to calm his nerves, Mr. May appeared in his yamen. The Imperial Secretariat was a secret place. Except for the officials of the Imperial Secretariat, outsiders were not allowed to enter. However, Mr. May was the Empress's man. She walked around the Imperial Secretariat like it was her garden. And no one dared to say anything. Li Mu was busy. After looking up at her, he lowered his head and asked, "What's the matter?" Mr. May walked in and said, "Can't I come and see if there's nothing?" Li Mu picked up a pen and wrote something on the paper. He said, "Of course, but I don't have time to entertain you right now. There's tea in the pot. Pour it yourself." There was no need to be polite with Mr. May. Li Mu was more relaxed in front of her than in front of the Empress. Mr. May didn't pour the tea. He walked behind Li Mu and asked, "What are you writing?" Li Mu said, "A script." Mr. May stood behind Li Mu and looked at him with interest. Suddenly he said, I have a question that I've been wanting to ask you for a long time. Li Mu said casually. What is it? Mr. May asked. I've read the strange stories from a Chinese studio that you wrote. Do you have any special fetishes for ghosts? Li Mu said. That was written by Pooh. What does it have to do with me? Mr. May said. There's nothing that can't be found out by the inner guard. Li Mu raised his head and said. Then you can ask the inner guard to help you. You don't have to trouble the Zongjing Temple and the Dali Temple with Master Li Yi's case. Mr. May coughed and said. The inner guard was established not long ago. How can they find out something that happened more than 10 years ago? You haven't answered my question. Li Mu shook his head and said. Of course not. I'm just treating everyone equally. There were ghosts and human women in that case. Why did you only see ghosts? Mr. May suddenly understood and said. I see. I thought you had some feelings for Xiao Bai. Li Mu looked at her in surprise and said. Why do you have so many strange things to say today? You're just like His Majesty. Li Mu thought of something and said to her. You're becoming more and more like His Majesty recently. That's not good. You're different from His Majesty. If you imitate His Majesty, you'll delay your life. You might really die alone. Mr. May crossed his arms and said. Tell me, how am I different from His Majesty? Li Mu said honestly, even if His Majesty isn't the emperor, he's still a famous beauty in Luoyang. Whether he's arrogant or gentle, he's always liked by people. Do you think you're as beautiful as His Majesty? It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to find a new clue. In the Great Hall, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, the evidence for Li Yi's case was conclusive back then. Investigating it now is already an exception. We can't keep wasting the court's resources because of this case. The Minister of Works, Zhou Chuan, also stepped forward and said, The Fulu School wants to investigate this case. The court has already satisfied them and given them an explanation. The court has its dignity and can't be forced by them. The officials of the new party and the old party had already spoken. Their wishes represented the wishes of most of the court. If His Majesty still insisted, it would damage the court's dignity and the officials in the court would not agree. At this moment, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong, also stepped forward. The officials in the court already knew that the new party and the old party had joined forces to settle Li Yi's case. Under everyone's gaze, Zhou Zhong walked to the center of the court, took off his official hat, and slowly knelt down. When the officials saw this, they were all stunned. Lord Zhou is. Why is he kneeling? Why did he take off his official hat? The officials were in an uproar. In front of the crowd, Prince Zhou stared blankly at the kneeling Zhou Zhong and muttered, Good fellow. Zhou Zhong knelt on the ground and placed his official hat beside him. He touched the ground with his head and said loudly, I'm guilty. Although Assistant Minister Gao didn't have one, concubine Gao should also have one. She wouldn't not save her brother. The Minister of Personnel glanced at Zhou Chuan, who was in the corner, and said indifferently, The Zhou family's 2 death exemption medallions have already been used last time. I wonder if the Empress will spare Minister Zhou. Zhou Chuan looked at him and said indifferently, Unfortunately, father-in-law gave that medallion to my wife before he passed away. Chen Jian looked at the people around him in a daze and felt that he didn't fit in with them. Out of the 7 people standing here, only he didn't have a death exemption medallion? The Minister of Personnel saw his worry and said, Don't worry, the late emperor bestowed 13 medallions, and we have already used 12 of them. If I remember correctly, the last medallion should be in the hands of Prince Shou. Hearing Prince Shou's name, Chen Jian heaved a sigh of relief and immediately said to the jailer outside the door, Quickly go and report that I want to see Prince Shou. Not long later, Prince Shou walked over slowly. Chen Jian grabbed the bars of the cell and said hurriedly, "Prince Shou, you must save me." A moment later, after hearing his words, Prince Shou smiled and said, "What kind of relationship do we have? Everyone is doing this for the Shao family. Isn't it just a medallion? I will give it to you." Chen Jian heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." Prince Shou touched his waist with one hand, and his expression suddenly changed. He said in shock, "Where is my medallion? Where did my big medallion go?" Chapter 366. Prince Shou touched his body and said regretfully, "I seem to have lost my token." Chen Jian grabbed the bars of the cell and said with a trembling voice, "Prince Shou, please don't scare me. This concerns my life." Prince Shou thought for a while and said, "Well, I'll go back and look for it. It shouldn't be lost. You wait here, and I'll tell you when I find it." Seeing Prince Shou leave quickly, Chen Jian leaned against the wall weakly. He looked at the other people in the cell talking and laughing. The atmosphere was very lively, but the lively atmosphere was theirs, and he had nothing. Although they were in the same cell, they were not the same. At the same time, in another cell, Zhou Zhong said slowly, "Back then, he and I offended the interests of the upper class and strongly opposed the death exemption token issued by the late emperor. The courtiers and the emperor could not tolerate us. He was framed for treason. Although there was not enough evidence, what they needed was just a reason. Before he died, he entrusted Qing to me and asked me to protect myself first, and then slowly complete our great cause. For our great cause, we can give up everything." Li Mu asked, "This is the reason why you gave up on her?" Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "At least, before you moved to Fulu school, I had no other choice." This was the reason why Li Mu had been guarding against Zhou Zhong. This kind of person had a firm goal, and was extremely rational. In their eyes, family and friends were not as important as their great cause. They could sacrifice themselves at any time. Li Mu admired his patience and ambition, but he would not get too close to this kind of person. He looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "You made a choice in the end?" Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and said, "This is not a choice. I believe that if I didn't finish it, someone will do it for me and do it better." Li Mu said, "Don't look at me like that." Zhou Zhong continued, "Back then, the late emperor gave out 13 gold medallions. He tried his best to abolish it, but he incurred the displeasure of the late emperor and died because of it. All these years, 3 of the 13 gold medallions have been used up, including the old concubine's gold medallion and the Zhou family's gold medallion. There are 7 left. Among these 7 medallions, 6 will be used up this time. The last one is in the hands of Prince Shou. These things shouldn't have existed from the beginning to the end. In the future, we will probably never see them again." Having said this, he leaned against the wall and sat down. He closed his eyes and said, "You can go. I'm already very tired. The prison of the Imperial Clan Temple is a good place to sleep." As soon as he finished speaking, his breathing calmed down and he actually fell asleep. Li Mu slowly walked out of the prison. In the courtyard of the Imperial Clan Temple, Prince Shou and Zhang Chun were playing dice under the shade of a tree. This was the case that had the greatest impact on the court in all these years, and involved the widest range of people. And this was only the mastermind. If the accomplices were included, who knew how many people in the court would be implicated? However, why did Zhou Zhong do this became a mystery in the hearts of the people. Did Zhou Zhong lose his mind? Not only did he court death, but he also pulled in his accomplices. I don't understand, I really don't understand. That's right, what do you think he's after? Did something go wrong in his cultivation, and he was invaded by his inner demons, causing him to go crazy? In my opinion, it might be because of the unequal distribution of benefits that caused internal strife. In the entire divine capital, everyone in the streets, taverns, and tea-houses were discussing this matter. No matter how they thought about it, they could not imagine that the people who framed Li Yi back then were not found by the imperial court. Instead, they were wiped out because of internal strife. As for why Zhou Zhong did this, there were different opinions. Some said that he was invaded by his inner demons, some said that he had lost his mind, and some said that the old party had internal strife. In a restaurant somewhere, an old man could not listen anymore. He slammed his wine bowl on the table and said in a deep voice, "Did you forget that more than 10 years ago, other than Li Qingtian, there was also Zhou Qingtian in the divine capital?" "What Li Qingtian, Zhou Qingtian?" 14 years ago, I was only 5 years old. I was still playing with P. I didn't know anything." "Old man, what are you talking about?" The young people in the restaurant were confused. A few of them who were over 30 years old seemed to have thought of something, and a look of realization appeared on their faces. More than 10 years ago, when the late emperor was still on the throne, it was the darkest period of the divine capital in their memories. At that time, the rich and powerful only needed to pay a fine to kill someone. At that time, it was not uncommon for the rich and powerful to kidnap women on the streets. At that time, the officials of the Great Zhou were corrupt, and governance was chaotic. The people suffered greatly. The people of the divine capital would rather take a detour than walk past the government. Even during those dark times, there was still light in the divine capital. At that time, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi, punished the corrupt officials and brought justice to the officials of the divine capital. The director of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong, redressed the grievances of the people. The two of them persuaded the late emperor to abolish the Silver Penalty Act and stopped him from giving out the gold medallion. At that time, they were one of the few rays of light in the hearts of the people of the divine capital. They were known as Qingtian. Every year on your death anniversary, I'll get people to burn more paper money for you. Chapter 367. Of course, the material used to make the death exemption golden medallion was not ordinary metal. Li Mu had asked Hyun Jinko about it. According to Hyun Jinko, the metal in his hand was a piece of meteoric metal. In the cultivation world, meteoric metal was called meteoric metal. It was a metal that did not exist in the 10 continents. It was extremely tough and was most suitable for refining weapons. It was one of the main materials for refining heaven-grade magic treasures. Therefore, Li Mu found a new box and put it away. It might be useful in the future. Then he began to think about something. Although Zhou Zhong's suicide attack was useful, according to the law, he himself could not escape the death penalty. Of course, Li Mu could not watch him die. After thinking about it, he left the house and walked toward the palace. At the same time, in the southern courtyard, it was a mansion with more than 10 entrances. Several figures gathered together. They did not look happy. "I've told you that Zhou Zhong is a traitor. We can't trust him easily. Now not only have we lost control of the Ministry of Justice, but we've also given away the entire Ministry of Personnel. What's the point of saying all this now? Who knew that Zhou Zhong would be so cunning? He seemed to listen to us on the surface, but he always had evil intentions. He destroyed all our years of hard work. Preposterous. I can't take this lying down." The people present were all members of the Shao royal family. They were all furious that Zhou Zhong had betrayed them. At this moment, one of them looked at King Shou and asked, "Fourth brother, don't you still have a death exemption golden medallion? Give it to Chen Jian. He has been loyal to us for many years. Even if he didn't make any contributions, he still worked hard." King Shou spread his hands and said, "I lost that death exemption golden medallion." "What? You lost it? Where did you lose it? You actually lost such an important thing? What else can you do?" King Shou shrugged and said helplessly, "I can swear to the heavens that the death exemption golden medallion is no longer in my hands. Perhaps this is his fate." "You really lost it? You really lost it? Have you searched for it?" "I tried using an object-seeking talisman, but I couldn't find it." "Look at you, other than drinking tea, listening to operas and gambling with dice, what else can you do? How did our Shao clan end up with you?" "Sai, forget it. Whether Chen Jian dies or not, I don't care. But Zhou Zhong must die. If he doesn't die, he will forever be a disgrace to our Shao clan. Anyone can survive, but Zhou Zhong must die. Send this letter to the Zhou family. They should know what to do. Didn't he want to overthrow Li Yi? I would like to see who will save him this time. In the Chang'e Palace, Li Mu prepared the dishes for the Empress. He also poured fresh and fragrant tribute tea into a jade cup and placed it beside her hand. Zhou Yi said, "There are no outsiders here. You can sit down too." Li Mu said, "I'll just stand. If your Majesty has any orders, please call me." Zhou Yi glanced at him and asked, "Why are you so good to me today?" Li Mu asked, "Did I not treat your Majesty well in the past?" Zhou Yi was speechless for a moment, then said, "That's not what I meant." Then she said softly, "Sit down. I don't want to eat alone." Li Mu sat opposite her and accompanied her to eat for a while. At a certain moment he raised his head and asked, "Your Majesty, how do you plan to deal with Zhou Zhong?" Zhou Yi said, "According to the law, he should be beheaded." Li Mu quickly said, "But he turned himself in and confessed all his accomplices. It can be considered meritorious. Shouldn't he be given a light sentence?" Zhou Yi took a memorial from the side and handed it to him, saying, "This is the memorial that the Secretariat just handed over. Take a look." Li Mu opened the memorial. From the signature, it was handed over by an official of the new party. In this report, there was a detailed list of cases where Zhou Zhong had covered up for the officials of the old party over the years. A single case was not a big deal, but when all of them were put together, it was enough to convict him of the felony of bending the law for personal gain. This crime could be heavy or light. If it was light, it could be a forfeit of salary. If it was heavy, it could be beheaded. In the past 10 years, in order to gain the trust of the old party, Zhou Zhong used the power in his hands to cover up many officials of the old party. He also violated the law and did many things that were beneficial to the old party. They were all listed in this memorial. Perhaps only the old party itself could understand these things in such detail. It seemed that Zhou Zhong's behavior of harming himself and hurting the enemy had thoroughly angered the people behind the old party. The old and new parties joined forces to put him to death. In order to execute Zhou Zhong, the old party even exposed some of their own scandals and sacrificed some people. The purpose was to make Zhou Zhong's death irreversible. Zhou Yi picked up a piece of tofu and slowly ate it before saying, "These crimes added together are enough for him to die twice." Li Mu picked up his chopsticks and put them down, saying, "I think that although Zhou Zhong violated the law in the past, there is a reason behind it that cannot be ignored. His good friend was wronged and died tragically. He had no way to seek justice through the imperial court and the late emperor. How desperate was that? In order to redress his good friend's case, he violated morality and endured humiliation until today. He is praised and respected by the people. If the imperial court does not care about the reason and sentences him to death, I'm afraid that people will not be convinced." Zhou Yi glanced at him and asked, "So, you are here to plead for him?" However, since the imperial court had investigated, no matter what the outcome was, they had to accept it. The other 6 were already prepared. After the 3 provinces made their verdicts, the 6 gold medallions were placed on the table of the Imperial Secretariat. Only the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Chen Jian, sat on the floor and muttered, "I'm so stupid. I only knew that I was with you to frame Li Yi, but I didn't know that all of you had gold medallions except for me. I regret it, I really regret it." After sentencing the masterminds, the left assistant minister asked, "How should we deal with Zhou Zhong?" The right assistant minister said, "Based on the crimes he has committed over the years, he should be executed." The left assistant minister looked at Zhou Jing and asked, "What do you think, Lord Zhou?" Zhou Jing said, "I am deeply ashamed that my younger brother framed a loyal official. I will leave the following matters to the 3 of you." With that, he slowly walked out of the Imperial Secretariat. The head of the Imperial Secretariat shook his head and said, "I am also a little tired. You 2 can do as you see fit." With that, he also left with his hands behind his back. The left and right assistants looked at each other and exchanged glances. Zhou Zhong had single-handedly turned the imperial court into a mess. After this incident, Both the new and old parties hoped that Zhou Zhong would disappear forever. His disappearance would be a good thing for the imperial court. The left assistant minister cleared his throat and said, "If that's the case then." At this moment, Mr. May walked in from outside and said, "His Majesty has decreed that the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong, tried to redress his friend's innocence. Although it is pardonable, it is not pardonable by law. From today onwards, he is stripped of his position as assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice and will be banished to the army." The two assistants looked at each other again and bowed at the same time. "Yes, Your Majesty." Although banishment to the army was lighter than the death penalty, it was still more severe than exile. Moreover, the place of banishment was near the borders of the demon nation or the netherworld. It was desolate and dangerous. Even if the banished person did not die under the blade of the executioner, he would die under the hands of the demon ghosts. The difference was that the latter way of dying was to protect the great Zhou. It was more heroic than the former way of dying. Criminals who were banished to the army were usually used as cannon fodder. Even if they were at the fifth realm, they would not survive. This ending should be enough to satisfy those people. At the Imperial Clan Temple. "You are not righteous. You will not die a good death. You will not die a good death."